but I will call the meeting to order. Do you have any elected officials or anyone here that would like to recognize this evening?
Cheryl, I would like to introduce the General Manager of Post Oak Savannah, Gary Westbrook, who's come at our invitation as a resource during our discussion on this. Thank you for coming, Gary, and we sure appreciate your being here.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Workshop.
Pardon me?
Thank you, Mr. Workshop, for kind of taking these, don't you say?
Yes, but we have an agenda for the workshop too. This is a workshop. Did you get the workshop agenda?
Yes. So you called me, or?
Yeah. It says call to order for the workshop. I know, I thought it was going to be informal too, but it's set up as a formal meeting. Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else that we would like to recognize? If not, we will go ahead and begin with public comments, 3 minutes each. Who can help me comment? Who can comment? Did anyone sign up?
Was there a sign up?
Come on,
I
dude.
think for the workshop, we can just do it informally.
Okay. And also, I spoke to Mr. Tuttle, and he said that after the presentation, that we will take just as many questions from the public and not just be the board. So that everyone gets to have input, gets their questions answered. Oh, and here I'm rescued. Here comes Mr. Talbot. We just got the public comments,
Okay.
but I think just announcing that questions that the public can ask, other questions they want to bring in the presentation. Okay. So are we ready to begin?
Yeah.
Are you going to go ahead?
Usually there's some kind of record or something here. Where the microphone, I guess you can all hear me.
Yes, sir.
You
Yeah.
use this mic, I think it would be better. Everyone will be able to hear you with that.
Okay. Okay. I think you all know who I am. I've made comment, I'm Hugh Brown, I've made comments to you 1,000,000 times. I just saw recently maps for desired future conditions, and I don't know who desires those future conditions. I don't. My Calvert Bluff well would be dry. My Simsboro well, which is 440 feet deep, would be down below 300 feet. I mean, it would cost me a lot more to pump water out of it, and probably a lot less yield coming out of the well. And frankly, it looks like that somebody desires a lot of water mining. And that just seems all wrong, that it's going to hurt a lot of people, and we need to not do that. We need to, I think ideally, the water coming out of the aquifer should be no more than the water going in. That's one reason last time around I gave you some preliminary thoughts on aquifer recharge augmentation. But we need to do what we can. I think we've got probably too much permitted already to the big boys, and I would really be happy if we didn't do any more, but we need to take care of it, take care of the aquifers. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to address the board as a public comment? This is your opportunity.
I've got something I'd like to say. My name's Don Hardy, and I spoke a few nights ago. I think some of y'all heard me, and the more I think about this, the angrier I get. I'm always willing to help someone And if someone's being attacked and I'm around, I'm going to bring God's wrath to help them. I would come to their rescue in a minute. And I look at this issue. I'm from San Antonio. Until just a few years ago, I spent my entire life there. We have the Edwards Aquifer, which is enormous. And I know there's arguments about how much water there is there. I know there's a massive amount. If they needed water, I would be more than happy to say we should give them some of our water. But anyone who drives through San Antonio or Austin sees plush St. Augustine lawns, which I don't even have at my place in Lexington. I'm not even watering in Lexington because I worry about cost. San Antonio's water bills have doubled and they don't care. If they had cactus and rocks strewn on their yards like you do in Arizona and they were still running out of water, I would say, by God, we need to help them. But that's just not the case. And for them to demand our water, where my spring, I'm really worried, and the more I hear, the more I'm realizing my spring's going to go dry. And it's just not right. And just like I would come to the aid of someone who needed help, I need help. I'm the one in trouble. And I hope y'all know, and I hope y'all are willing to come to our aid. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? If not, then Jim will turn it over to you or Andy.
Jim, Andy, Mike, what's going to be the format tonight? I was hoping as a workshop, this would be more of a cross-board discussion. And I see it's a slide presentation. Are we going to have time for discussion after that?
That's the intent. But one of our purposes is we've noticed in the past few months there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication regarding some of the kind of fundamental aspects of what the DFCs are.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so we wanted to try and make sure that before we get to our hearing in August, that everybody has the same vernacular and we're all speaking the same language. So that's the main purpose of our presentation, but then we would like to have as much interaction as we can before the board meeting afterwards.
And what time will this meeting adjourn in order to prepare people for the board meeting? To get people prepared?
Probably at 7 o'clock, 6:50.
All right, thanks.
6:15, give time for a bathroom break and then.
Let me officially bring this into workshop. We will adjourn into workshop regarding a presentation and discussion on the desired future conditions proposed by the Groundwater Management Area 12 in the current round of joint planning. This is not a hearing on the proposed DFCs. A hearing will be conducted at a later date. Andrew Donnelly, our hydrologist, and the general manager will provide a presentation. And I'm with Phil, looking forward to this presentation, but I would like to hear some feedback from those people who have taken time to attend tonight. Okay?
All right, well, I'll get started. As Jim said, there's been a little bit of confusion about how the joint groundwater planning process works in GMA 12. There's been a lot of things that are being said and things that are being talked about, and how joint groundwater planning relates back to other issues within the district. So we thought, let's talk about the joint groundwater planning process and GMA 12 at a very basic level. This is not the hearing on the DFCs, so I will be presenting some numbers as they stand right now, but we're not going to be talking about whether they're good or bad or what's right or wrong. We're just kind of trying to get everyone oriented as to what this process is all about, because it's a fairly complicated process. In the title, refresher on joint groundwater planning, that third word there, planning, is an important one to remember. This is a planning exercise. This runs kind of parallel to regional water planning, and the numbers that come out of this process plug into regional water planning. But it is a planning exercise. The numbers that come out of the process are just that. They're planning tools We are doing our best to kind of come up with some semblance of guess as to what pumpage might occur in 50 years. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. It's a planning tool. So it's important to keep that in mind, because it's easy to get lost and look at some of these numbers and look at what's going on and get focused on what they're saying rather than understanding this is a planning tool. Quick reminder, joint groundwater planning. Lost Pines is a member of GMA 12, Groundwater Management Area 12, along with Fayette County, Brazos Valley, Post Oak Savannah, and Mid-East Texas GCDs. The groundwater districts are the sole members of the GMA. This leads a little bit to a communication gap, because members of the board are the Lost Pines district, but nowhere in the state do we actually have entire boards or members coming to and really getting involved with the GMA process. And because it's complicated, there's kind of things come through myself or the general manager to the board, and there has been some confusion, and there's no way around it. So that's why we want to kind of have this workshop, let you know what's been going on, kind of answer some of the basic questions. And we probably, in the fourth round of planning, we will probably do this more regularly, just to kind of keep you abreast, because it's an important process. We're in the third round of planning. The first one was completed in 2011. The second one was completed in 2016. The final adopted VFCs are due January of next year. So first of all, what is the GMA doing? They are adopting desired future conditions. You'll hear it more commonly referred to as simply the acronym DFCs. Desired future conditions are things like drawdowns, saturated aquifer thicknesses, spring flows. They are criteria adopted by the district representatives in the GMA during joint groundwater planning. That's directly from a TWPB guidance document. If you want to think of it as, what do you want your aquifers to, quote, look like, unquote, at some point in the future? DFCs, mostly across the state, are water levels or drawdowns. That's the one that's most commonly used, and that's the one that we use in GMA 12. DFCs must be quantifiable. They need to exactly define numerically a specific condition about the aquifer. They typically relate to a specific condition 50 years in the future. That matches regional water planning's planning horizon, which is 50 years. And they must be physically possible. We can't have one district that says, we don't want any drawdown, and the next door district says, we want 500 feet of drawdown. That just doesn't work. So they have to be compatible. Example DFCs. First one is one of Lost Pines. The average drawdown Simpson aquifer in Lost Pines GCD should be 240 feet by 2070. In some of our karst aquifers, like the Edwards aquifer that was mentioned earlier, they focus around spring flow. I have large spring discharges, and one of them up in Clearwater is GCD must maintain at least 100 acre-feet per month of stream or spring flow in Salado Creek, and that's primarily large spring discharge during a repeat of the drought of record. And in the Ogallala, you'll see some that have percent volume of storage. Hemphill County has at least 80% volume of storage, and Hemphill County will remain in 50 years. That kind of relates directly back to water levels in the aquifer drawdown. But these are the way that some of these VFCs are couched in statements. Some notes about VFCs. Remember, they are aquifer conditions for future drawdowns. They're not pumpage. The GMAs don't directly get to say, this is how much we pump out of the aquifer. They say, this is what we want our aquifer conditions to be. We'll get into that in a little bit. These are the only things that are adopted or approved by the GMAs during planning. And importantly, and we'll talk about this in a minute, the new GAM that we have has significantly impacted the results of the drawdowns that are calculated.
The GAM is?
GAM is a groundwater availability model. Sorry, yeah, we get into the acronyms. I had the whole slide. When I realized we were trying to cram this all in and I had a limited amount of time, I did initially have an acronyms. There's a lot of acronyms. GAM is a groundwater availability model. It is basically a large regional model that the Texas Water Development Board and other users, including the GMAs, use to model conditions, pumping conditions in their impact on the aquifer.
Is that a program that the Texas Water
That
Development Board
it is a program
distributes to the different
correct.
conservation districts?
The GAM program, the GAM group is an entire group within the Groundwater Division of the Water Development Board. They either develop these models or they contract out and manage these models being developed. The Water Development Board then becomes the keeper of these models, and anyone who requests it can download them and use the models. That's a whole separate presentation, but they can be fairly large, complicated models. Anyone who knows how to run ModFlow, which is the flow code, can get these models and work with them. And we do have a lot of the stakeholders, some of the stakeholders here, consultants, whatnot, will be able to do it. I run the GAMs all the time. So.
How accurately do they depict the aquifers under Lee and Bastrop County?
It depends on, GAMs are regional scale models. They are meant to answer regional scale questions. You run into issues with regional scale models if you start looking at specific areas and saying, this is going to happen in this particular spot. The GAMs are typically 1 square mile by 1 square mile grids. They inherently have to do a lot of averaging. You may have multiple wells in there that have different depths to the aquifers, and you have to kind of make an average. And so it's really, they're designed to answer regional scale questions. So you got to be careful when you use a GAM to drill down and look at what's happening here, because they're dealing with dozens of counties and calibrating across a large area, and they may not totally get it right in each individual area.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
How well known is the geography of the faults in these aquifers? I mean, are there a lot more faults than we know about, or do we feel like we're pretty well on top of the fault map? Shows that.
The faults have long been an issue with the GAMs and the geology in general. There's a lot of faults that do run through many of these areas, and they do impact the groundwater flow. I'm sure there are many more in there that are being included in the models. And one of the problems we had with the earlier version of the model is that they had the faults included in a way that was not realistic in terms of their impact on groundwater flow. So that was one of the primary reasons that it was fixed. When we're dealing with subsurface geology and hydrogeology, we're dealing with something that we can't readily look at. I'm sure a lot of oil companies are coming here doing seismic surveys and all that, but that's data that's not available to us. So I'm sure there's a lot more going on there than we really know. It's a constantly evolving, we're constantly learning about how the faults impact flow in the area. And we're seeing that, the general manager and I are seeing that as we're going out and looking at water levels in Lee County in response to what's going in Vista Ridge. And we're seeing some wells are not seeing a whole lot of impact, whereas other wells that aren't that far away are showing a lot of impact. And that's likely due to the impacts of faults. So we were actually talking about that the other day and thinking this is something, the more wells we can get in there and start to get a handle on where we're seeing impacts versus not might help us get a handle. So it's something we're continually learning, and that's just the way it is with subsurface geology and hydrogeology.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes, sir?
have y'all got a conclusion on what would be the best thing for us to do according to the drawdowns from Vista Ridge and any outlying areas of water that's pulling water from this district?
Mr. Sherrill, that's an excellent question, and that'd be a good conversation to have at a future board meeting. But it's not directly, it's not, we need to address that, but tonight's not the venue for it, I don't think.
Will you remember to put it on the list
Yes, sir.
one time soon?
Yes, sir.
It'll come up. So let's move on with what we got, another one of these acronyms, MAGS. You will hear the acronym more than you hear what it stands for. It's Model Available Groundwater. The MAG is the amount of groundwater pumping that will achieve the DOC. It's essentially the availability of water from an aquifer. Availability is a planning term. It's important to note that it's not the physical availability, but it's rather an availability that's based on policy and science. The policy side are the DOCs that are decided by the GMA and adopted by the GCDs. The science side is the groundwater availability model, which is used to make or verify the pumpage calculations. And that's done by the staff at the Texas Water Development Board. It's also important to remember that MAGs, model available grain, are not a permitting cap. It is really a planning tool. There is some language in Chapter 36 regarding mags and permitting, but it's not a hard cap. How it typically works. The joint groundwater planning process is a 5-year process. The GMAs will meet regularly, review material. It includes data, it includes the GAM, it includes GAM runs. There's 9 factors that are required by Chapter 36. They regularly receive stakeholder input. Over 5 years, I don't know, we might have 15 or 20 meetings or something like that. It's probably a bunch. I don't remember exactly, but it's at least a dozen meetings. GMAs typically develop GAM runs to support the development of DFCs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then the GMAs will choose a set of DFCs based on the material review, based on stakeholder input, and of course, based on the GAM runs that are conducted by the GMA. Once approved, these are the DFCs. They kind of stand on their own. What the Lost Pines Board has said is we are okay with, for example, in this Innsbruck, which I mentioned earlier, 240 feet of drawdown by 2070. That's what the statement says. GAM runs made by the GMAs. GMAs will develop these runs to evaluate the impact of potential pumping scenarios on aquifer conditions. I like to think of it as, I've said that DFCs are a policy and the boards are the policy makers, and the policy makers should understand the impact of your policy decisions prior to adopting those decisions. The board actually has some guidance documents, and they say first knowing the answer is recommended. And if the GMAs didn't do this, everything would fall on the Water Development Board. And anyone who runs models knows you can come up with a lot of different pumpage scenarios to meet a specific condition. An example would be some of the GMAs are going to GMA-wide drawdowns, and if GMA 12 said we want to have 100 feet of drawdown across GMA 12 in the Carrizo Aquifer, the board could come in and plug all of the pumpage in Fayette County, crank it up high enough until it got to be 100 feet average across the GMA. Likewise, they could put all the pumpage in East Texas on the other end of the GMA, crank that up high enough until they had an average, or they could do pretty much anything in between. They don't really want to be in the position of having to dictate where pumpage goes. That's part of the reason that the GMAs do develop these pumpage data sets to work forward in the process. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just a bit confused because I know there's Chapter 36 talks about groundwater districts managing the water within the district, but then we have the Water Development Board and the GMAs doing policy. Is that statute? I mean, which is, it just seems like there's a conflict, and perhaps there's not, perhaps I'm just not real clear, because what is the statute that gives the GMA authority to set the DFCs for all the groundwater districts? That's what I keep missing.
Well, there's a section in, and this is Natasha's better than that. 36.108 is the section that discusses joint groundwater planning, and this process is outlined in there. And Natasha.
That's correct. And it outlines kind of cooperation between, the districts within the GMA, and the factors that you're supposed to consider and the timeline upon which you meet.
Okay, because I know Post Oak, of course, has objected to the impacts of the DFCs upon their planning and their management. And I mean, it could be us, not them, and so I just keep getting confused as to the statute.
We'll
study that better.
I'll talk about that a little bit. I don't want to delve into too much because there is some controversy with it, but I just kind of want to give a brief outline of what's going on and maybe what the background is. And I'm sure Mr. Westbrook might have something to add there, but we're I think I have my ringer turned off. I think it's a little bit. All right.
I'm surprised it's not Elvis.
It was.
Okay. So the GMAs will conduct GAM runs. Covered that slide. The modeling that we do, we are working with the newly updated GAM. It was the original GAM, I want to say, was put together in 2010 or so. It was updated in 2018. There was some minor revisions that were done last year. It's important to remember the updated model produces significantly different results than the old model. And we'll get into that in just a second. The current working baseline simulation, you may hear it referred to S12, sometimes PS12, those kind of get bannered around. It's basically number 12 is the one we're dealing with. You might also have heard of S7. That's a very slight modification, or S12 is a very slight modification from S7. So if you see that, they're basically the same thing with respect to Lost Pine. There was a slight difference in pumpage to Brazos Valley from S7 to S12. The pumpage included in the baseline file was based on anticipated growth. We looked at least for Lost Pines, we looked at the regional water planning's projections for population and water demand in Lee County, Bastrop County. We looked at our current water providers. We looked at what the growth was going to be and how much their permits were, and we estimated how much their growth was going to extend over the years. Since we did that, the next time we do it, that'll probably change, because my guess is, especially for Lee County, the population and demand growth is going to be different, because Austin is kind of going nuts. But then when we get that data, we'll go through the process again.
How does this include when you export water?
Good question. We have several different components in our baseline file. One is going to be exempt pumpage. We just looked at what we thought exempt pumpage was, and we ramped that up slowly over time. We looked at our permit holders, primarily municipal, and we said, this is how much they're pumping now. Aqua, they're pumping at 7,000 or 8,000. They have 21,000 acre feet of permits. We looked at, based on regional water planning, we assumed that over 50 years they would fully utilize those permits over that 50 years, so we ramped it up. Export permits, we assumed for the purposes of putting together this baseline file that when we were doing it, that the permit holders would get a buyer for that, for the water immediately. We added 2 or 3 years in there, delay to put in the infrastructure, the pipelines and all that stuff. Then we assumed that they would go through their phase permits, the 2 that we're talking about in Lost Pines are phase, and we assumed that they would move through their phases as quickly as they could, and that they would be pumping 100% of their water. So that's why, and you'll see this a little bit later, you'll see a big step up in the Simsboro pumpage from 2020 to 2030, because those 2 projects were assumed that basically between those years come fully online. The impact of the updated GAM. This is an important slide. We did additional runs with the old numbers. Remember, the GAM, the DFCs stand on their own. So we tried to take the DFCs as they were and plug pumpage into the new model and see what we had to do to the pumpage to match the old DFCs. We couldn't do it. The existing DFCs in the upper aquifers, the Sparta, the Queen Cedar, and Carrizo, we couldn't get the new model to meet those drawdowns, even if we set the pumpage to vast parts of the GMA to 0. The existing DFCs in the deeper aquifers are feasible. However, we needed a lot more pumpage to achieve those drawdowns. So if we stuck the old pumpage in, the old pumpage in, we got much less drawdown. If we wanted to meet the DFCs as they stood, we had to pump a lot. So basically, the current DFCs from the second round of planning won't work with the new GAM, and so readopting the previous DFCs isn't an option. I've heard that a lot. Let's keep the DFCs. For the upper aquifers, they just don't work. We've got to come up with new numbers if we're going to be adopting, when we adopt new numbers, new DFCs. So here's where the current DFCs and MAGs are. This is from the second round planning. We've got, this is just kind of a refresher, 5, 15, 62, 100, 240, and 165 feet of drawdown in those aquifers between 2000 and 2070. And those are the official MAGs, the official pumpages that occur in the 6 aquifers that meet those DFCs. Now we've got a comparison of S12. I mentioned that's kind of the working the initial start for the for where we stand with the pumpage for the GMA. You'll notice that for several of the aquifers, at Sparta and the Queen City both, in the old file, we had about 2,400 feet in, flat across the board and 1,300 acre feet for the Queen City. And you notice that we did come in and we did revamp, and we have basically increased those pumpages from 2020 to 2070. By 2070, they're roughly where they were in the old run. The Carrizo, same thing. It ramped up from about 7,500 to 12,000 acre feet. The new run with all, because we sat down and we really looked at the numbers hard. We currently at about 4,700. We ramped up to about 13,000 acre feet. Calvert Bluff increased a little bit from about 2,000 to 5,500, as opposed to previously it was 4,000. And the Hooper, it previously went from 700 to 1,250. It now goes from 1,700 to 3,300. It's important to remember, and many of you weren't here when this happened the last time, we had to make a last minute adjustment in the Simsboro Hooper to get the DSCs that were passed to match the model. And the Hooper, I basically had to cut the previous numbers in half. So actually, we're back to where we kind of thought we would be to the last time. Now, the big difference here is going to be Simsboro. As you can see previously, they're in the 30 to 35,000 acre feet per year range. S12, based on the assumptions that I told you about before, starts off at 24 and then it jumps to 106. That's where those big export projects come online. And then it just kind of ramps up from there. So summary of the DFCs and the S12 drawdowns. Again, we talked about those current DFCs, 5, 15, 62, 100, 240, and 165 feet. Those are from basically the end of 99 to 2070. I did pull the numbers to kind of make them match. And I also pulled the new numbers from the model. The reason we have a shift from 1999 to 2010 is because we have changed, we have updated the model. The previous model was calibrated through the end of 1999, and so our predictive time frame for those runs were from the end of 99 through 2070. The new model is calibrated through 2010. So now, the period of 1999 through 2010 is now part of that historic calibration time set, and our predictive portion of the model goes from 2010 to 2070. But you can see it's not a huge difference between the two. But the numbers we'll focus on will be 2010 to 2070 because that's the predictive portion of the new model. As you can see in the Sparta and the Queen City, those numbers came up quite a bit. The Carrizo has also come up. The Calvert Bluff, the Hooper is about the same. The Calvert Bluff's come up a little bit, and the Simsboro has come up a little bit. Remember how much the Simsboro pumpage increased compared to the old model. So that's actually this kind of shows what I referred to earlier when we have to pump a lot more to get the same drawdown with the new model.
And if
Yes, sir.
if we're pumping more water over this planning period, how is it that we end up with levels higher than what we have?
These are drawdowns. These are not levels. These are how much is going down. So the bigger the number, the farther it's being pushed.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Let's just look at the Hooper.
Okay.
I have a well in the Hooper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on your pumpage versus existing bags, it sort of triples. I mean, in between your existing mag and your S12 pumpage.
Correct.
I don't understand how that converts to the drawdown numbers.
In the model, you will have impact. The Simsboro, for example, changes one. And in the model, you will show, over 50 years, you will show impact to the adjacent aquifers below being Hooper and above being the Calvert Bluff. The impact of what's going on in Simsboro as water moves vertically based on what the model is showing. That's not going to be something that happens immediately. That's something that happens over the long term.
How long?
I don't know. The impact of vertical connectivity between these aquifers, and we were talking about a regional model that handles layers that may be very complex. For example, the Calvert Bluff is 1,000, 1,200 feet thick. It's a lot of sediment. It handles it all as one. You can do pumping tests that, you know, see how much impact you have. So say you pump a well for 30 days and how much, but that's really not going to tell you how much you have when you're pumping large quantities of water over long periods of time. So I know, for example, that down in Gonzales County, they've got a well field in the Carrizo. I think in the center of it's been 20 years, they've got 100 feet of drawdown in the center of the aquifer in the center of the well field, and they have not been able to see any signal after 20 years in the overlying quicksand. So it's a small amount that's happening over long periods of time. Most of what you're seeing, everything we're seeing with Lee County, is not happening vertically. It's happening in shallower wells, but that's because the aquifer isn't flat. It tilts like this. So it's actually a lateral connectivity, but it's because the aquifer is getting shallower when we say shallow wells. It's not actually moving vertically between aquifers.
But every formation's got to be different. We have no idea what that stratification separation between the aquifers consists of, do we? I mean, I guess we drill and do a core and find out, but surely the water would transfer more quickly through some separations than they would through others, right?
Yeah, I mean, every aquifer is going to be different. I don't have answers because, you know, a lot of this is, you know, how this plays out over time. And that's one of the reasons when we come in and do, I'm sure Post Oak Savannah has certainly Calvert Bluff wells in and around that well field, this ridge. Over time, they're eventually going to be able to see what kind of impact is happening vertically. So, and that's one of the things. That's the reason we collect the data. And you know, right now I can make some guesses, but they wouldn't be based on anything because we haven't collected the data.
By the way, you said nothing about water quality. Now, the question of water quality in a given aquifer, how much variation is there in water quality in different wells in that aquifer?
Depends which aquifer we're talking about.
Well,
Simsboro's got big, massive sands. You tend to have water that moves through it fairly quickly as you're, you know, in different wells across a well field, for example. You're not going to see, I think, a whole lot of variation in water quality. In other aquifers, for example, the Calvert Bluff, where you have more silts and clays, and you may have sand channels. If you happen to put a well into that intersects one of the channels in the Calvert Bluff where you get more water out of it, you probably will get a different water quality than if you move over a quarter mile and don't get a sand channel and you get mostly silts and clay. So it can vary. It just depends on the aquifer.
well, I'm saying how typically in dissolved minerals and stuff, what kind of order of magnitude, you know, concentration difference is there do we see in the aquifers?
Over short distances, I don't think it's a lot. When you start moving down dip, I mean, the down dip extent, the official footprint of the Carrizo-Wilcox aquifer, for example, is based on a water quality designation on the down dip end. As you get down dip, as the water has been there longer, you will get poor water quality. The longer the water's in the aquifer, the more time it has had to interact with the aquifer material, the more the water quality goes down in a sense of potability.
Do you think it's possible that if a person say has good water in the well and a big pumper's over here, and that's changing the movement of water in the aquifer, that then that person's water quality could go down in his home well?
Usually when you see water quality changes in response to large production like that, it's going to be where that production is happening. Because that's where you've got the biggest drawdown, that's where the water is moving to. So the producers will see that. That's something, you know, depending on the area, that's something that producers are aware of and they are paying attention to. I don't know about, it depends on the particular situation, whether an ancillary well that happens to be in the area. I wouldn't guess generally so, but it might be possible. But it's mostly going to be where that pumping is actually occurring that's going to have your water quality changes. Yes, sir.
On water quality, are there any underground reservoirs of saltwater or other contaminant fluids that lower the pressure in these could suck in this contamination. I know in other places I've lived, hundreds of miles from here, that is the case with saltwater formation. I don't know if there's anything around here.
Well, I mean, I think that's what Mr. Brown was talking about. Yeah, as you move down dip and as you go vertically deeper, you'll get different water conditions. It's gradual.
So it's possible, but we don't.
We're not
a large reservoir.
for the purposes of what we're talking about here in the joint groundwater planning process. Groundwater quality, based on the nature of the aquifer, hasn't been a significant component of the discussion, just because it's not been an issue. There are other areas where it is, and that's why the state's been divided up into 16 different groundwater management areas. Each one has its own unique challenges. Gulf Coast, they worry about subsidence. That's not really an issue here. So they're all a little different.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about Vista Ridge, which is, of course, at the forefront of lots of people's minds. There are kind of two different issues that we're dealing with. One is the Vista Ridge as being included and incorporated into what GMA 12 is doing, and the other of which is kind of the actual impact of Vista Ridge pumpage on wells in Lee County. Two kind of separate issues. So we'll talk a little bit about both of them. A little bit of history. Vista Ridge permits were issued by the Post Otis Savannah District in 2004, and they were amended and adjusted and reallotted in 2008. 15,000 acre feet per year in the Carrizo, 40,000 in the Simsboro. The switches were turned on basically tax day last year. They started pumping through about August at half capacity, and then they ramped up to full capacity. They've been on, with a couple of exceptions. They were down in December for a week of maintenance, and then during that winter storm, I think they said they were down for 10 days. So they're pumping. And everyone knows that because we've got a lot of it. Now, although the Simsboro pumpage is greater, the Simsboro wells in Vista Ridge are a lot deeper, and therefore you have fewer wells in Lost Pines and in Post Oak Savannah that are expected to be impacted. And Simsboro is also a much more productive aquifer. The Carrizo is the aquifer that is at the forefront of everyone's mind. It's causing the concern within our district, specifically in northern Lee County, east of Lexington. It's important to remember when you turn on a well field like that, the drawdowns are most significant when it first turns on. Those declines will lessen as time goes on. They'll still be going down, but it's not going to be the precipitous drops that we've seen thus far. Vista Ridge and GMA 12. The existing mags, again, the pumpage in Post Oak Savannah is less than the current Vista Ridge pumpage from the Carrizo. When Vista Ridge pumpage was included in the most recent in this round of GMA 12 simulations, the drawdowns were greater than Post Oak Savannah wanted for that aquifer. It's important to remember that that pumpage has also impacted Lost Pines drawdowns. If you remember, the simulation, I think, went from 62 feet to about 140 feet. That's because the pumpage has increased as well as it's being borrowed. So we've kind of got a double whammy there. Post Oak Savannah wishes to limit drawdowns, i.e. DSCs, in the Carrizo, which requires limiting the pumpage in the Carrizo within their district. Most of the Carrizo pumpage in the district is from those 9 wells in Vista Ridge. If we lower, when we take the pumpage that's in the model run, this is getting into a little bit of a controversy. I don't really want to delve into too much, but when you lower the Vista Ridge pumpage in the current DSC, you also lower the drawdowns in Lost Pines, which may require us to lower the DSC, although if we play with something called the variance, we may be able to handle a bit of that. The difference is that although our DFCs are lessened, Lost Pines doesn't have the ability to manage to that because the drawdowns that are occurring in our district are from pumpage that's happening outside of our district.
Andy, what do you mean by lessened? You mean that's,
Well, in other words, if the numbers that we have specifically are, the current dam run has 18,000 acre feet per year in the creek zone. If you, in Post Oak Savannah, if you reduce that to 12,000 acre feet, your drawdowns are going to be lessened. You're not going to have as much drawdown because you don't have as much pumpage.
okay.
So it's as simple as that. And Post Oak Savannah wants to be able to manage to the, and Gary may be able to help out here. I'm trying to cover this as even keel as possible. They want to be able to manage to the number that they want to be managed to. The problem that happens on our side of the board is we don't have the ability to manage it because we have a couple of municipal pumpers in the Carrizo and Lee County, and it's just not, what's happening there is not what's happening on our side of the board.
Andy, at the end of your presentation, could we get Gary?
I think
would you,
so.
Give us your perspective on Post Oak Savannah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure not to stop what you're doing, but to allow time for that.
Yeah, because this is where this is basically the crux of the conflict, I think. And I'm trying to cover it in an even keel manner.
Andy, will you clarify something?
Yes, sir.
Something for me. It says lowering the Vista Ridge pumpage, we may need to have to.
Lower our
the
DFC. Yeah.
But that's lowering the DFC, not, that's raising.
Correct. That would be a lower drawdown.
Let's draw down.
DFCs are drawdowns.
Just want to make sure that
Right.
I was reading that correctly.
It's one of those fun double negatives.
Exactly.
Well, by
Lower is higher.
lower, you mean, in this instance, it would go, say, from, this is just a number out there, from 12,000 to 10,000 is what you mean by lowering?
No, because the DFC is not a pumpage.
The DFC would go
The
from
DFC is a-
350 to 325.
Yeah, or in the Carrizo,
Carrizo.
it's less. It's 140, 100. I don't remember
It's
what the numbers are, but it's going to be less
It's gonna be
drawdown.
more water left
Correct.
than drawing down.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that everybody gets that.
Important to remember that, remember that when I opened up this presentation, we are talking about a planning process, so,
Andy, I just want to make
okay.
sure, in your handout, you're saying that Post Oak Savannah wants to include the full pumpage of
No,
this.
I'll get to that in a second. Post Oak Savannah wants to include a different pumpage for their county in the base model runs.
In the creek.
In the Carrizo.
But how can you put a number if that's not the number you're quoting?
Remember, this is a planning exercise, and that's what I was just about to get to, is that we are conducting a planning exercise. This kind of gets a little bit to the crux of the issue. We're trying to plan, and this is the last bullet talks about that, is lowering the pumpage in the.
But I'm sorry, I want to have, planning is to take the tools that you get, the best tools that you can get, whether you're planning for water, you're planning for growth, you're planning for municipal provision of services. You use the numbers that you anticipate. You don't, if it says your population growth is going to grow over 5,000 in the next 10 years, you don't plug in 2,500.
Okay, that's.
And because for me, a planning process is to put the most accurate information into your planning process.
True, but, and that gets a little bit to the issue, is that we have several of the districts that say, yeah, we need to include that pumpage that's actually happening. And Post Oak Savannah is saying, we're going to be planning for, they want to plan, they're planning to the DFC. And so they have a number that they kind of wanted to limit their DFC to, and they want to manage to that number. That may require adjusting the pumpage. So yes, it may be that now, it may not be that in the future, depending on how this all plays out. So they want to be able to manage to a number that they like. And other districts have said, well, you've got this pumpage that's happening, that's what you need to use. And that kind of gets down to the crux of the issue, is that you have that basic conflict. And, okay, you actually got this pumpage that's happening versus well, we want to be able to manage to what our objective and our goal is to manage this aquifer to. And that kind of, I think, sums it up. And so I'm not saying which one's right and wrong. I'm not here to advocate. I'm not about to say one was right and wrong, but I'm trying to explain the issue as succinctly as I can.
I'm grasping what you're saying, but it would seem like we would want to know what tools are going to be utilized if they're going to want to manage to get to that DFC.
Okay, yeah, well, they have tools. We all have tools in terms of our management plan and how we manage to the DFC. So those tools do exist.
Okay, but again, if you're not going to employ them in a manner that's going to assist in getting you to the DSCs that we're trying to get to, we haven't accomplished. I mean, I'm not trying to argue a point, but my point is, where I disagree with you, is planning is what you use to develop how you're going to build out, how you're going to do things. And yes, you can change numbers, and maybe there's tools. Maybe you're going to issue a building moratorium at a certain point. That's a pretty dramatic tool to implement. But saying that you're going to implement a moratorium, the likelihood of a municipality issuing a moratorium is likely not going to happen.
President Talbot, can I interrupt just briefly? Being that we are posted for a DFC workshop, I want to keep the focus of our discussions to that. I mean, the management tools for Post Oak Savannah. Okay.
We're talking the planning process. We're talking the elements of the planning process. And I'm trying to understand, I keep saying that the planning process, and we're going to use tools to get us to those DSCs. I want to know how that's going to work. Because if that's not being done, then the planning process is flawed.
Well, I understand that. But President Talbot, respectfully, part of that planning process is the creation of the DFCs. We're kind of talking about how we're going to achieve them, and that could be permitting. I believe it goes a little bit outside the scope of joint planning. But I agree with the development of the DFCs. Vista Ridge is an issue, and we should discuss that.
And Mike, your initial point is basically the heart of the matter between, do you plan based on the numbers that you have that you know, or do you, and that's really the question we're trying to address, and I'll speak more to this during the general manager's report. And our current process that we've used in developing DFCs for the past 2 cycles has been developed based on known production. And now we're going back and revisiting how the first round of DFCs were established and trying to look at other methods we can incorporate into that to counterbalance just using the known production methods that we have used. But what you've said struck at the heart of it is, do we just use the numbers that we know are true? Do we know what's going on, or do we find the differences to balance it? And that's where the questions of regulatory issues come in, and that's the next step once we have them set.
I'm very confused by the last bullet point.
Again, we're talking about the drawdowns in the wells that are occurring in Lee County are not occurring based on what the DSC is. The water levels in the aquifer are reacting to actual pumpage that's occurring from Vista Ridge. Okay, so this is planning versus this is what's actually happening. The way that you're going to see an alleviation of water level declines or anything like that is going to have to be a modification in the pumpage that's occurring in those wells. It's just people. It's a complicated kind of process, and maybe a little bit down the line, but.
The first sentence says.
I want to call a point of order. Excuse me, a point of order. I don't mind if you want to ask a question.
Well,
Excuse me. You need to raise your hand, and I will recognize you. You need to state your name, and what county you're in, so that we can put that in the record, put that on record.
I'm sorry, my name is Doug Marusi, I live in Bastrop County. And I'm just confused because the first sentence says, lowering the pumpage.
Lowering the pumpage in a model run.
Doesn't decline, doesn't change it or cause a decline, but then the second sentence says, only a reduction in pumpage will reduce it.
Only lowering the pumpage in the current GMA run, GMA model run. So basically, we're talking about, we can model anything in our predictive simulation. We can say, we'll do this, we'll change the DSC, and we'll see water levels go up. But if water levels that are actually being pumped out of those Vista Ridge wells doesn't change, you're not going to see a real life change in water levels in the field. So it's kind of to illustrate the disconnect between we're doing predictive planning simulations versus what's actually happening in wells. And what's actually happening in wells is response to, well, not just Vista Ridge, but any pumpage, and they're all in your own well. You know, you are impacting the aquifer with real pumpage, and maybe that's a little confusing. I kind of wanted to make sure that people knew, again, this is, we're planning, we're doing the best we can to kind of spin out predictive simulations and coming up with planning tools. But the bottom line is, what we got back to is, do you plan with what you know is happening, which is what some of the districts are saying, versus Post Oak Standard, which says, well, we have a goal, we have a DSC that we want to meet, we have tools that we can get to meet it, we want to be able to have that ability. So that's basically the conflict. And so when we're done, Mr. Westbrook might be able to elaborate a little bit more, but I'm thinking I've kind of nailed the crux of the issue. Yes, sir. Did you have your hand up? I thought I was saying over there. Okay.
Here's, state your name here.
Hugh Brown from Lee County. It's a basic question about aquifers that occurred to me. Supposing you take say Simsboro aquifer and you take out 100,000 acre-feet of water out of it. That's a huge volume of water. As I understand, water is essentially uncompressible. So what part of the aquifer no longer has water in it? I'm not talking about pressure, I'm talking about volume. I mean, is it farther down to recharge it?
Water is actually compressible.
How compressible? Is it compressible?
For example, at the bottom, I'll take the most extreme example. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which has 35,000 feet of water above it, it's about 5% compressed.
Okay, but
so it's not much, and that's why the drawdowns that you see when you pump out of the pressure, the confined portion of the aquifer draw down so quickly. You know, the amount of water that you have that's a pressure component is much less than when you actually take water out from the pore space.
so it's not being replaced by air or vacuum or compression of the
No, water, the aquifer itself remains fully saturated, the actual material.
Okay, so it's like the sands don't move and compress or anything?
Not in this aquifer. Now, the coastal aquifers, we start to see subsidence. That's a whole different issue, but real quickly, when you reduce that pressure, it allows the material that the aquifer is in to start to compress.
But it doesn't do that here?
No, this is it's a different kind of, there's never been any report of any subsidence in the cruiser water.
Let's let Mr. Donnelly finish up.
Yeah, we're running out of time.
I want to let the workshop go over, because I know you want to hear from Post Oak Savannah. Since they're here tonight, I want to give them an opportunity to speak. So, we won't ignore your questions, because I am going to let the meeting run over a little bit tonight.
We talked about this. GMA 12 said that all the funding needs to be included. Post Oak said disagreed, and it was a 4-to-1 vote for the proposed DSCs. We kind of would like to get to the point where we have a unanimous vote for DFCs. I think we're still working on this, but that's kind of where it goes. And the proposed DFCs under consideration includes all of these components. Last topic we'll talk about real quickly are these DFC zones. We brought this to the board, I think, originally in 2018. I think we've talked about it one time since then, and we've presented it at least once to the GMA. The DFCs are currently district-wide averages, even though pumpage does not occur in each of those aquifers across the entire district. And because we don't have pumpage across the entire district, we don't have wells across the entire district, and therefore we have no ability in some of the, in large swaths of some of these aquifers to actually measure a water level to determine compliance. That's basically monitoring drawdowns, monitoring water levels across the district is impossible due to the availability or lack thereof of wells. Our DFC zone is an alternative approach which would shrink the DFC monitoring zones, our defined DFCs, to basically the aquifer outcrop and the shallower down dip portions of the aquifer where most of the wells are present. These zones don't necessarily cover some of the deep wells that are far removed, but they're up where most of your exempt users are, where wells for us to actually be able to monitor are located. So
And Andy, that's also where you'd have your surface water, groundwater.
that's where you have your surface water, groundwater interactions at the top. So I'm going from deepest to shallowest. This is the Hooper, and the reason I started with the Hooper is this one really shows the issue. The Hooper is up there in blue. That's its outcrop, and that's our proposed zone. That's where basically our Hooper wells are located. Right now, the DFC is calculated all the way down to the Fayette County line. The Hooper down there is thousands and thousands of feet deep. It has really, really poor water quality. There are no wells down there. In the foreseeable future, there never will be any wells down there. So we're never going to be able to measure the water level down there. So our proposal is to restrict or define where the DFCs are calculated and where they're monitored to the shaded area, which is for the Hooper, very tight up and around the outcrop. Simsboro is a little bit more prolific aquifer. We have wells that are a little bit farther down dip. We have not included all the wells. There's a couple of the wells that are deep wells. But this covers the vast majority of the users and what's going on that we want to protect with DFCs. Calvert Bluff is a little less extensive than the Simsboro. In the shallower aquifers, you can see we have quite a few wells in the Carrizo that are down at that level. And by the time you get out of the Queen City and the Sparta, you're really not trimming a whole lot off from a countywide average. You're getting the very, very corner of the district. Now here's the impact of these DFC zones, and we looked at it for S12. And as you can see, the countywide average drawdowns for 2010 to 2070 for the Sparta and Queen City are 22 and 28 feet. If you remember, we didn't trim a whole lot of the district off, so those only reduced to 19 and 27 feet. But as you move into the Carrizo and the Calvert Bluff and the Simsboro and Hooper, those differences, especially the Hooper, where you've got 174 feet if you include everything down to Fayette County, but up in the area where all the wells are and where all the production is 43 feet. So that's the impact of these zones. It's important. A couple of important notes about these DFC zones. DFC zones are not management zones or management areas as defined in District Rule 9.2. This is not the same thing as what we're talking about with respect to the management zone for the Carrizo Aquifer in northern Lee County, where we're actually going to be putting restrictions on how much additional pumping. These are simply revising the area where the DFCs are calculated and monitored. The district has not yet adopted the DFC zones. That is something that we're hoping will be in the final DFC resolution. It would then be incorporated into our management plan. Importantly, the timeline. Right now, in summer 2021, the districts are holding public hearings. I believe all the districts have had their public hearing with the exception of ours, and I think we will be trying to look for mid-August to have a hearing. They're also required to receive comments on the proposed DFC. There was a minimum of 90 days that we had to do that. Late summer, early fall, the GMA will reconvene to discuss the comments received, address the comments, and if necessary, they will be revising the DFCs and adopting final DFCs. Those final DFCs must be adopted by the GMA by January. Within 60 days, the explanatory report supporting materials must be submitted to the board, and they have 90 days to inform the GMA of any deficiencies. Well, we've got a lot of work to do. It seems like a lot of time, but it's really, really not. So in summary, remember this is joint groundwater planning. This is a planning exercise. The DFCs are aquifer conditions, not pumpage. So when we say keep the same DFCs, we're not saying necessarily keep the same pumpage. It is a drawdown condition. And that is what is adopted by the GMAs. The MAGs are the pumpage that achieves the DFCs, and that's determined by the board. MAGs are not a permitting cap. The update again has caused a lot of issues. Remember that those existing DFCs won't work for the new model. And that in the upper aquifers and the lower aquifers, they'll work. We have to pump more to get them. And therefore, the existing DFCs can't be readopted, at least not for those upper aquifers. The DFC zones are basically just a tool to focus the DFCs on the areas where we actually have use, and we actually have wells that we can monitor. There are two issues with respect to this ridge: what's going on in people's wells and in the field, and what's going on in the GMA 12 planning process. Those are not necessarily directly correlatable. How to include this ridge in the model, as we've talked about, we'll probably hear about in a second, has caused considerable disagreement within GMA 12. We don't want disagreement. We want to be one big happy family and have a unanimous path forward. We're working towards that, I think. Most important takeaway, we've got some hammering out again. Just want to make sure I had a couple points people remember. Time is critical. There's still some disagreement on GMA 12, and those aquifers can't be readopted to DFCs because they're not feasible with the UGAN. And we certainly are going to have some questions, so there we go.
I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to Phil and let him introduce himself so he can speak.
Thank you. Gary Westbrook, the General Manager of Post Oak Savannah District, is here at our invitation. He has come as a resource. And of course, the DFCs before Groundwater Management Area 12 are crucial to his district and to ours. The boundaries of our two districts have a long boundary. We share common groundwater and how to manage that. And as I understand it, Gary's district has taken a little different approach to ours and has objections to using PS12, as I understand it. And we want to give you, Gary, the opportunity, if you wish, to tell us what we think we need to know about that.
Thank you, Jim. First off, thank you for the invitation. You have a capable staff and capable hydrogeologists. I'm not here to criticize them in any way. There's no doubt that we feel like you guys have your own issues you got to balance and your own concerns that you got to consider as you manage your district, just like we have as we manage ours. A little bit of history. And I think you all have seen the paper that our position paper that we sent to each of the districts. What we would have considered desired future conditions are some conditions of aquifer that we evaluated beginning in 2005, and based on evaluations of well screens and wells in certain areas of our district, we adopted rules and put it in the management plan and divided our aquifers into deep and shallow zones. And then we established conditions which we were going to manage to back then, and that was even before we adopted our first round of desired future conditions in 2010 as a GMA. But the point of that was there was so much conjecture about who was going to produce how much water and when. Instead of trying to figure out how you could guarantee projects, we simply established limits on impacts to the certain parts of the aquifers. And in our initial evaluations, we came up with a number of somewhere in the neighborhood of about 120 feet of drawdown in the Cree zone, and it yielded about 11 or 12,000 acre feet of water, depending on how you ran the model.
Well, we come along into the first couple of rounds of DFCs, working within the GMA, and both of our neighbors did not want to see that much drawdown in the Carrizo. And so we reduced the pumping in the pumping file so that we would be compatible with our neighbors. And that's how we ended up with our current numbers in the Carrizo. The current numbers in the Carrizo were at 65 and then 67 feet of drawdown, average across the entire district, in the last two rounds of joint planning. Well, now we have this round of joint planning. We understand that Vista Ridge has come online and is pumping at a rate of about 15,000 acre feet a year out of the Carrizo, or at least that's their intent. We understand that. But when these permits were issued originally in 2004, then amended later in 2008, and then again after that, we required them to do the model runs, and they knew what the management strategies were. Our rules have in them section 16, which establishes thresholds that we will meet as we achieve a desired future condition, and management that will take place during that process. At threshold 1, which is 50% of a desired future condition, then you, and by the way, there's some other things in threshold 1, you do studies, and at threshold 2, which we're in, threshold 2 in the Carrizo, you have an opportunity to either to continue studies or make management changes. As Andy pointed out, there's no way for any of our districts to achieve the Carrizo DFC now that we've got the new model. Well, all of these original numbers were established using the old model. We get that. Well, now as we move forward through our second threshold, if we're going to manage to our current Carrizo DFC, then we'll begin curtailment in the next 5 years. That is what has always been our management strategy, to allow production until we see threats to the aquifer that we've deemed a protected level. So now we're at threshold 2, and we know that we can't achieve that particular DFC. So we've done the evaluations and done the studies, and we would like to see a DFC that's, as you saw what we proposed in our S13 run, based on about 12,000 acre feet of pumping. We did different evaluations to come up with what we would like to see. We took about 7 or 8 months. We used Intera. They've been our hydrogeologists for quite some time. They actually constructed the original Carrizo-Wilcox model and performed the recent updates to it. And so we asked Intera, run it at 18,000, 15,000, 12,000, and again at 9,000 acre feet of pumping at Post Oak Savannah. And we evaluated the impacts and the number of wells that we predicted would be impacted throughout all of those numbers. And the reason we ended up at 12,000 was for several reasons. First, it's consistent with our original estimation of available water back in 2008. It was at between 11 and 12,000 back then. And so we thought, well, it's good to be consistent. The actual impact of the aquifer as expressed in a desired future condition is also consistent with what we would like to see all along. I mean, that's kind of been where we thought we would end up anyway. And so we're, in our mind, we're being consistent with what we've always done. And so, the reference to known pumping, Director Cook, I appreciate you providing everyone with the requirements in 36108.
There's some extra copies of that on the table if you'd like to get a copy of that.
Sure. And y'all have already heard comments from some of your own folks as well as other folks outside of your district. Of all the factors to consider here, known pumping is not one of them. Certainly it's a property right, but so are the property rights of each and every landowner and well owner in a district or in our entire GMA. And so that's kind of a really quick history and run through how we got to where we are and why we would really like to see what we consider to be scenario 13, S13, instead of S12. And S13, those values are within the 10% variance that was adopted by the GMA. And let me say real quick here, when you're running a model run, your pumping files are important, and your ability for your modeler to run the model with that pumping file and how he runs it
may vary a little bit from someone else's model. And so you adopt a variance in there so that it provides a little flexibility for the model results to come out right, as well as for the districts to manage to their own individual goals. And so our S13 value that we would prefer impacts about half the number of individual landowners in our district. I think you guys probably have a similar trend, I guess I would say, over the next 50 years. And it also, if we were to use that run, I believe you guys, your DFC and the Carrizo would be less impact by maybe a couple of feet. You're almost within the 10% variance. The other districts are all within the 10% variance for what we requested. And so the reason that we don't use the quote-unquote known pumping is exactly as I've outlined, and I hope that that's been easy to understand, even though there's, like Andy said, there's nothing easy about any of this. It's, and I appreciate your comment earlier, that this is what Jim and Andy and I do every day, and I woke up at 4 a.m. yesterday with an idea. I hate those days because I can't get back to sleep till I write it down or tell somebody. So anyway, it's what we do, and we live it, and we eat it, and we breathe it, and we take it seriously. And so that's I guess what I would comment on there. I hope that made sense, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Gary, one real quick one.
Yes.
You were saying that you used the term until we feel that the aquifer levels are threatened.
What we
That's based on
consider
the
those.
DFC, right?
Yes, sir.
Make sure
The,
and
DFC.
you also used curtailment as a management tool. If those become threatened,
Yeah.
you're not afraid to curtail to keep that.
Yeah, and what was important there, I noticed a while ago, someone referenced, you guys at Aqua have like 21,000 acre feet permitted, and your actual use is around 7 or 8, and you're gonna grow into it.
Right.
And we realized that. And so early on in issuing these permits, the evaluations were performed, and, when will a project come online? How fast will they ramp up? Those are all questions that were not known, and that's one of the reasons we adopted the management strategy that we did.
Makes perfect sense.
It gave us some flexibility to grow into that situation.
Good.
Well, I appreciate the question. And so now we feel like we're going to be forced into kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Everything that we've built for the last 15 years to get ready for this time is now not going to be of use to us. Because if we're forced into that larger pumping file, then the DFCs aren't going to be hit anytime soon. The management that we had prepared won't be of need, and we'll see a lot more impact.
Change your management plan. Yeah,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks, Bill.
Gary, are you concerning the file S13? Is that does it sort of supersede or come after S12? Is it a more refined?
We just took
With what
S12 and adjusted the pumping
Well, I
down
see.
in the creek.
So that's really that's really your own number, the S13, and you're proposing that as a replacement for S12?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And one other thing I would add is, in our way of looking at each of these 3 joint planning cycles that we've been through, we allowed each of the districts to establish their own pumping file, because we felt like each of the districts knew what was there, what was going to come online, and when, better than everybody else in the GMA did. And so this is the way we've always established our pumping file, is doing our best estimates about, what would come online and when and how fast. But then also, the overriding factor to us was how many wells will be impacted. And we've been evaluating well screens and pump levels since 2005 to try and establish those management strategies. And so we just would really like to be able to use our own pump file again.
You mentioned that non-pumping is not one of the criteria for determining DFCs, but I believe Andy said that the last 2 planning cycles, that was true. Is that true? No pumping was used?
No, I mean, there's a difference between what's required. There's a difference between what's required when developing the DFCs. What I talked about was how we in Lost Pines developed our baseline pumpage file, because you always want to have a starting point.
No,
And
that's-
so when we developed our baseline pumpage file, we started with what we know is happening now. And then we used all the tools. We looked at regional water planning and how much the projections are increased, what the permits are. And we basically developed a 50-year ramp up of what we thought, based on our variety of assumptions, what pumpage would happen given the demand and population projections and all that.
Yeah,
And so that was just our starting point.
No, but I didn't know if Gary, if you did that as well, or if the GMA as a whole did that. And if they did, my question to Gary is, why shouldn't we do that? Because if it's been done in the past, it's a change going forward.
No, for us, we have never included known pumping. One of the dangers that we see in doing that, let's say that we establish this as the methodology we're going to use going forward, and that was the main discussion at our last GMA 12 meeting. And I appreciate everyone coming together to talk about what we had just seen and how are we going to move forward, and are we going to make all this consistent among the districts? And I think we all agree that we'd like to do that. But if we're going to use known pumping, then let's say that you issue a permit, and maybe it comes online, maybe it doesn't. But when it does come online and it does ramp up, even though you threaten your desired future conditions, in the next round, you have to count all of it. And your numbers are just going to keep getting bigger. You're never going to draw that line in the sand that you say, we're not going to cross this. And this is a great example for us. Here we are approaching that line in the sand, and somebody else is going to say, well, you're going to have to move that line. And we would rather not have the process set a precedent like that.
I won't put my foot in my mouth.
No,
Why
you
are
won't.
we here?
Sir?
If we're gonna continue to move this line and we can't cross the line, now you're telling us we're gonna have to cross the line?
That's kind of how we see it, and we'd rather be able to manage to the goal that we originally started with. And remembering, we really thought about 100, 125, 127 would be our average drawdown in the Carrizo, and that was back in evaluations we did in 06 and 08. And now we're actually kind of at that, and we got people saying, no, you're gonna have to go to 170 something. And so we'd like to settle in at that 135 range, which is ballpark where we thought we'd be.
So who's asking us to go to 270?
A 170?
Or 170?
Well, that's the S12. If we include all the pumping in the S12, then that's where we end up in the Carrizo.
The S12 winds up in the Carrizo or just?
Well, so this has been a great workshop to talk about the difference between DFCs and pumping. So the DFCs that we consider and all the data we consider is the result of simple math in a complicated computer. Andy was like, simple, wait a minute, in a very complicated computer room. But what you put in gives you the result. If you put in our case, 18,000 acre feet a year, every year for the next 50 years of pumping in the Carrizo, then our DFC in the Carrizo comes back out of that model run at about 172?
172 for you guys,
170.
right?
I've lost track of all these now. I know ballpark, but anyway.
Yeah.
It comes back at 172, and we know the impacts of that impact about 90 more wells over the next 50 years than what we'd like to see. And so S13 reduces the pumping to 12,000. You run that same model, and the impacts come back at like 140, 137 to 140. And so we impact less well owners that way. That makes sense?
Yes.
That confuse anybody else? Okay.
And the only way you cut that back is
It's really just a
to
to handle
medical.
Yes, sir.
So you limit the amount of water that's gonna be pumped from the Carrizo, so you can meet that goal of your 140, whatever it was.
Yes, sir.
And us, meaning you guys and us, have the ability to do that.
Yes,
In our
sir.
management.
Yes, sir.
Y'all tossing these numbers around, 142 feet of drawdown. You shake your
Average.
head all you want.
Average.
Ask the questions.
Average.
It's average.
Yeah, and so in the shallow, you know, like Andy said, these aquifers dip down, they fall off at about 100 feet, 125 feet per mile headed toward the coast. We kind of mirror the coastline in our central area here. But you may have 450 feet of drawdown where the aquifer is 1,000 feet to the top of the aquifer, and it's 200 feet thick. But up here at the surface, you may only have 10 or 12 feet of drawdown. But your average, the average, as you average it across every square mile of that district, within that area, over that aquifer, is what we're talking about. That's the desired future condition, averaged over that whole area.
Can we set our own DFCs?
If they're compatible with everybody else in the GMA, yes, sir. That's what we would hope each district is able to do.
Are y'all conservative?
Define conservative.
Don't give it all away at one time?
I think so. That's why we set it up like this.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your patience.
Oh, no, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and, you know, we got our own problems, y'all got your own problems, and I appreciate that, and I'm not here to meddle. I promise you, I'm not here to meddle.
We appreciate you taking time out and hearing your views. It was very helpful.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman.
Does the board have any additional questions of either Andy or Jim on the presentation that we received? Is there anyone from the public that has any final questions? Yes, Michelle.
I'll just direct it to whoever wants to answer it. In the joint planning process, is it appropriate to achieve unanimity or compatibility? You already said compatibility. I think Andy Donnelly said unanimity would be nice. Is it appropriate for the planning process to impose unanimity through forcing a single district or more than one district to actually have to change their management plan? Is that contemplated, that that's the route we're gonna go? Because it seems like unanimity is gonna take us all down the record hole at some point.
Again, I'm gonna have to defer that to,
So your point is taken. And I've said throughout the discussions we had this spring with Gary, I understand the point that he's making, I understand where he's coming from. In the Lost Pines District, we are unique in that we have permits that have DFCs written into them. And during the last 6 months of a planning cycle, and this is how this played out for us, I wasn't comfortable with changing the process. What we had done in Lost Pines, what we did in Brazos Valley, what every other district was doing was including their pumpage. Gary was looking to deviate from that, and that's what led us into this dispute between Brazos Valley, Post Oak, Lost Pines, Mid-East Texas, and Fayette. It was basically a question of, in the last few months of a planning cycle of a 5-year process, for us, having the DFCs written into our permits, that makes it an issue for us. I didn't want to see a major change in how we were doing things. I understand Gary's point, and I told him at every meeting, we need to address this, but we can't do it this cycle. I don't think there's a time to do it this cycle.
So what does S13 do to Lost Pines? What do they have to change in order to adapt to S13 that would allow them not to change their management plan?
So for S13, we would have to make, we're within the variance, but I don't like using the variance to try and reconcile the books, so we'd have to make some slight changes to our Carrizo DFC.
To the DFC, but you wouldn't have to, are you saying what was making you uncomfortable, that it would somehow affect your permits? That's not an issue, or?
Again, it was a question of just the process that we follow. And I didn't want to see that process being deviated from. We put in it's how we did the last cycle, is how we were doing this cycle. And in the last 6 months, was it the last 6 months or starting in January of this year, this concept of Post Oak doing something different from what we had previously discussed, what we'd previously done.
I don't think they think they were doing something different. I mean, I think they thought they were being consistent moving forward, if I understand what Gary had said in his.
Well, and I think that was a communication error, because in the previous cycle, I was under the impression that every district had put in their pumpage. And now, apparently that was not,
We did put in estimated pumpage to an extent.
but not the entirety
Yeah,
of the permit.
to us, one of the most important parts of setting a desired future condition is not relying on the model to do it for us. If you let the model do it for you, then you don't consider those 9 factors. We're supposed to consider the 9 factors. We're supposed to look at the state water plan. It doesn't have to run the day. We're supposed to look at property rights, for those that pump and those that don't. That they all have property rights. We're supposed to look at that. Well, I mean, those 9 factors. And then, at the end of all of that, we're supposed to achieve the balance between the highest practicable level of water to be pumped and conservation and preservation. That's the balance. Now, who gets to pick how that's defined? Well, that's what us 5 on that GMA trying to do. To us, the balance was ignored. And by the way, Jim's right, this was a little late in the process, but this was late in the process because we just got the model refined and refined it again in the Vista Ridge area because of all the data and pump tests that we had put together over the last year and a half. And so we spent that 6 months trying to figure out where it needed to be, and then we brought the new information to the GMA. And I realized it was late in the process, but after we brought our S13 option, Brazos Valley added some more pumping in the Seminole, so it wasn't that late. So anyway, that's just, we would really like to be able to manage our goals and continue to do what we've always done. And those are best estimated pumping in areas and also evaluating wells and the aquifer throughout the whole area. And we just like to see that balance established.
Jim and Gary, the present scenario that we're using, S3, does that include all permitted pumping in all 5 districts?
S12?
S3, the one that we're using presently?
That's S12.
12.
Well, what,
12 was supposed to be a bookend run. And, well, actually it started off, I guess, S7 was the bookend run, and then it got modified a few times. And the whole point of the bookend run is to have this bookend and that bookend, and then you do all those 9-factor evaluations, and you end up somewhere in the middle. And what we've ended up with is that S12 bookend run being the one that was voted for. We didn't get off of that end.
I see. Well, we can't resolve my confusion here. I need to do a little background work before I ask any further questions. Thank you.
Well, we do need to bring this to a close, and I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. Jim, I might want to suggest that we have a workshop next month before the meeting. The board, again, has been hit with a lot of information, and so that we can keep the DSC process moving forward, we could have maybe just an hour workshop.
I have a spot in the general manager's report to talk about the hearing, and we can discuss it at that point.
Okay. Well, that being said, at 7:19, I will close the public hearing, the workshop, the workshop, and recess the meeting for 10 minutes, and we will start sharply at 7:30 with the regular meeting.
In this area, I don't know. I don't know how they originally mapped logs. A lot of times it's based on what they see in the log. That sounds more like a official feature, but I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Carl, how are you?
Right. Oh, the blue, they're blue well shells? Yeah.
I forgot to bring mine, I had my financial. But, let me see if I can bump one off my
They're not pumping huge amounts, but they're pumping a
I'll see if I can steal one.
So, yeah, it depends. And there's also, remember, there's also a shallow cinder furrow and a deeper cinder furrow that is separated. So if you're in the shallow and they're pumping those things in the deep, that could be another subject. Yeah, it could be. Counterculture, I mean, it's going to be slow. The biggest impact, like you said, is going to be you put a well through it, you get leakage that comes up through a well that's not an old well. But in terms of long-term impacts between, for example, Vista Ridge and what's going to happen with South Bluff, we're talking decades. It's not going to be. And also, South Bluff, you've got a deep South Bluff well. That's going to feel it before you get a shallow South Bluff. So it's really, they treat the South Bluff as all one, but it's like 1,200 feet thick. There's a lot of material. So what happens one side, one end versus the other, is completely different. So there you go. Look at it. Dig into it a little deeper. My gut feels me there. Not something that's going to be ramping up without going to be anticipated. That was one of the key ones. I don't remember
Don't get too excited.
Seven and 12 for us. I've got a spreadsheet that's got, that's how I put it, that's how I put it together.
Today? I wish I could have. A couple of months ago, a couple of us flew home from San Diego, and we got in about 11:30, and I don't want to drive Tommy down there. Yeah. So we took Uber from the airport all the way out to Bastrop. It took people $40. I said, I'll do that any day. Any day. Any day. Yeah, I mean, that cuts down a lot of hassle. Yeah.
One time I
Oh man, I use my time to have to go ahead and
Happy to do that.
Oh, by the way, I did get those,
Remind you that we want a few board members to cover.
did get all these things done.
So it didn't come up.
Yeah, it didn't come up. So there's our thickness. So you can see there's actually things there. There's our head. Head at the top. Orange and red are below the top. So we've got a little, this is the initial heads. And there's, you can see a spinner over here in our, that just happens to be in our area that we're interested in. There's after SB10, so you've got the same kind of thing. Yeah, so here we go where you've got a little bit bigger here. Yeah, you draw one level down in here. Most of those are not big. They're mostly less than 10 feet below the top of the water. Back for 250 to 300 feet generally. A couple of cells are bigger. This is what
Again, that's not much we can do about that.
even with all the conversions, I really, especially with Gary here, I wanted to make sure that we get kind of a fair and even treatment about that whole thing. So you can kind of see the concept, and it's pretty obvious. I think we just assumed it was going to be.
We use the rolling average. Permit rolling average
All right. We're back.
that was a much needed break.
I didn't even get a break. I may be bolting depending on what part of the agenda we're in. Yeah, move that over here so I can see, because I didn't grab one. I don't like paper.
Is that a COVID thing, or you've always not liked paper?
I just don't like paper. I've been going through all my files and all, but if it's important, I'll scan it. If it's not, I'll toss it. And I don't even have a filing cabinet at home. I don't even have a filing cabinet at work.
Oh, that's amazing.
I get rid of all my paper. Sometimes I'll print things out and scribble on it, and then when I'm done, if my scribbles are important, I'll scan it. Otherwise, it just goes in the trash or the recycle bin. All right, we'll see what.
I'm calling to order the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District Board meeting for the month of July on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021 at 7:36 p.m. at the Giddings Public Library, Orange Street here in Giddings, Texas. Item number 2, welcome and introductions. Again, we appreciate the interest that continues to be expressed by you all in several of the very difficult issues that the board is wrestling with right now. It seems like when they start, they all come together at one time. But your interest and your input is always appreciative. And again, I thank you for taking time. At the end of the day, we work for y'all, and I don't ever forget that. Item number 3, public comments. Again, I want to make myself clear on this. This is an opportunity to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda for this evening. It's something that you may wish to bring to our attention. It's something that you may want the board to take under advisement. But since it's not on the agenda, we cannot enter into a discussion with you other than to make sure that we understand the nature of what you're requesting or asking. So with that being said, is there anyone who would like to address the board at this time for anything that is not on the agenda? Linda.
It's very brief. I just have a request that the board try to get a hearing for the DFC set and give us as much time as possible.
Would you please?
I'm trying to.
I'm Linda.
Okay, what she stated, I can just, her request is a positive request about getting a meeting set as soon as possible regarding the DFCs so that you all have ample time to prepare for it.
Yes, and more people are getting interested in water, and we need time to talk to people. It's of considerable expense to nonprofits and people. You know, we don't have a lot of funding to do this. In fact, we're not funded, and so we really need more notice, especially on hearings. That's my only request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board at this time? If not, then I will, item number 4 is consideration of and possible action on the 2020 audit report. The report was sent out to us in advance of the meeting for us to review. Our auditor is present, as well as he has handed out the printed copy of what you received from Peggy at the office. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you, sir, and you can walk us through.
Good evening. My name is Robert Detillia. I'm with the District's Independent Auditor, Singleton, Clark & Company. I'm joining you tonight to present for the board's acceptance the district's audit for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2020. I'm going to be brief in my remarks this evening, but in doing so, I don't intend to omit anything that I feel like you ought to be aware of related to the audit. We usually focus on 3 things every year, and those 3 things are the type of opinion that was issued, whether there were any findings or management comments, and then lastly, we take a look at the calculated reserves in the district's ending net position or equity balance. I like to flip pages. All of you, I believe, have a copy of the audit. I'm going to talk about everything out in the air, so don't feel like you have to flip pages. We're just going to look at 2. If you could turn to the last printed page, page 31, if you're going to take a look. So on page 31, we've got a high-level summary, otherwise referred to as the schedule of findings and question cost. It's broken down into 3 sections. The first section deals with the audit as a whole. The second section deals with specifically state and local matters, and then the third section deals with federal. Given that the district did not expend in excess of $750,000 in federal awards, section 3 is not applicable. But if you'll direct your attention to the top of the page, section 1, you'll see the first item mentioned is the type of opinion that was issued for the year under audit. The district received a clean opinion, otherwise referred to as unmodified. It means after having performed the audit and in assembling this financial report, including the financials and any supplementary information, that in our opinion, it presents fairly in all material respects and is in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, which you want to receive. Moving down the section, had we encountered any internal control issues, they would be discussed, and you'll see there that there were no weaknesses noted, no deficiencies noted, and there were no instances of material non-compliance. Moving on to section 2, had there been a finding for the year under audit related to state or local matters, it will be discussed there, but as you see, for the years ended December 31, 20 and 19, there were no issues noted. Had there been an issue in the prior year, it would be presented there with its current status. But there were no findings related to state or local matters for the year under audit as well as the prior year. So that takes care of items 1 and 2 in terms of the type of opinion and did we encounter any issues that we felt we needed to alert you to as far as findings or management comments. Does anyone have any questions at this point? So the last thing that we take a look at generally is the calculated reserves and the ending net position of the district. If you would flip to page 11. So on page 11, we've got the income statement for the year under audit for the district. And there are 2 figures that we're interested in, total expenses and then the ending net position. And so for the year under audit, the district expended about $700,000. If you divide that figure by 12, we come up with an average monthly amount. And when you do that, it's about $59,000 and change. We'll say $60,000. And when you divide that into the ending equity balance of the district, or net position, which is the last figure in the column, 3.6 million approximately, you get 60 months. So the district has in reserve, meaning that if it did not take in another dollar of revenue, you could exist based on current year operating average monthly amount, 60 months. It's a very healthy equity balance. I'm not going to say much more about it. If you were a government, there might be a different discussion in relation to it and its size, but given that this is a proprietary fund, I'm not going to go any further. But if you have any questions related to that, certainly we'll entertain those. I'd like to take a moment to thank the district for allowing us to serve as the independent auditor, and I'd like to thank Jim and Peggy and Dana for all of their help in conducting the audit. Do any directors have any questions related to the audit? Anything I discussed, anything related to the report itself?
This is a general comment, and it's a comment from me, not from the board. Here it is, mid-July, and we're just getting the audit. And to me, that seems a little late in getting the audit. I brought it up last year, and I clearly understand you have much bigger clients, and their timeframes are due earlier than ours. But going all the way to July seems to be, from my perspective, stretching the envelope a little bit too far. And I clearly like to see us receive the audit earlier than we did this year.
Okay. we can work on that going forward as far as, and do it on your timeline, certainly.
I'm not asking on January 15th, like I say. I know you have municipalities, school districts and all that, and they have statutory compliance items. But at the same token, at this point in July, if we had to make an adjustment or something, the horse is pretty much out the gate by this time.
Sure.
Is there any questions from the board? Okay. Well, we thank you,
Thank you very much.
and I will entertain a motion that we acknowledge the acceptance of the annual financial report for the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, as presented to us by Singleton and Clark, certified public accountants.
I so move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second that we acknowledge the acceptance of the annual financial audit report as submitted by Singleton and Clark for the period ending December 30th, 2020. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is review and approval of the minutes of the June 16th regular board meeting. The minutes were sent out fairly quickly after the last meeting. The minutes were in the packet, and so we'll entertain a motion from the board regarding the minutes of the meeting.
Mike, I would like item 4, a little correction at the bottom. Director P. Cook asked going forward that all names be included in the minutes who speak. I hope as a retired English teacher my syntax is a little better than that. It just needs a little work to clean it up, and I'm sure y'all can do that.
Do you have suggested language, Director Cook?
Yes, Director P. Cook asks that in the future that all names of those who speak be included in the minutes.
That works. Thank you.
Is there any other suggested changes or comments for the minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes subject to the one correction as presented by Board Member Cook. Do I hear a motion?
I so.
Okay. Second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second that we approve the minutes of the June 16, 2021 board meeting with the minor change as presented by Board Member Cook. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Consideration of the financial report. Consideration of the financial report for the period of June 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. For the reporting period ending in June 30th, 2021, the operating fund balance stood at $469,746.53. As you recall, we discussed previously, we were letting that drift upwards a little bit to support the an anticipated drawdown as the mitigation fund comes online. The tax pool fund stands at $3,557,621.97, bringing us to a grand total of $4,027,368.50. User fees collected to date were $689,166.55. So we're just over halfway through the year and just over halfway to our expected revenue for the year of $1.3 million. Expenses to date are tracking where we would expect them to be. I previously mentioned that we knew we were going to have some more costs associated with the website. We basically burned up all of our storage for videos due to COVID, so we're going to have to pay more going forward to store additional audio and video for that. So we will have a budget amendment at the end of the year to make up for those costs. But with that item out of the way at this point in time, all of our other expenses are tracking where we'd expect to be for this time of year. Our fixed budget operational staff, taxes, all of that's where we expect to be. And so far, we have been well under 50% on our more flexible budget items, legal, hydrogeology, things like that. So overall, I'm fairly confident that if we stay the course, we'll be in good shape, and we'll just have a few minor budget amendments related to the website and a few other operational details. But at this point in time, everything else seems to be pretty solid shape. But I'd be happy to address any questions.
Looks good to me. Any questions from the board? If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the financial report for the period of June 1st through June 30th, 2021.
I so moved.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second that we acknowledge acceptance of the June financial report for the period of June 1st through June 30th, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, this is another that was requested. Item number 8, consideration of and possible action to designate a date by which meeting notices must be posted. 7, I'm sorry. My bad. Number 7, consideration of and possible action to approve an amendment to the district's 2021 annual budget.
Mr. President, members of the board, so the budget amendment that's in front of you is one we discussed in June. And what this does is it creates the line item for the mitigation fund that we discussed. So it basically at the time in June, we didn't know where that money needed to fit into our budget or how we were going to set that up inside of our billing system. So what we brought to you this month is just a simple budget amendment that creates that line item in our budget going forward, so that we can begin to properly account for those expenses and keep track of them as we move through the year. The money, like I said, we've got, basically the money is in the operating fund, but we also have the ability to pull from text pool to top that fund off as we need to going forward. So that's what the budget amendment that we brought for you tonight does.
You won't draw that entire fund
No, sir.
in one.
No, sir, no. So this is really more of a paper amendment, like we're creating the line item on our financial reports. We are not going to move another $500,000 on top of our existing operating fund, no, sir. Now, that money will stay in text pool until we're ready to pull it down.
Okay.
So Jim, under operating expenses, you'll just plug in that 8,400 between cleaning and payroll?
Sorry.
That's the
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, yes, ma'am. So that's where we would go in our budget.
Have we had any requests to expend any of those funds yet?
No, sir. Our goal was to have all the documentation up by July 1st. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit behind. I'll touch on that in the GM report. We wanted a supporting document to go with it to help explain exactly how the process was working, and we've just been held up getting that posted.
Okay. All right. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the budget amendment to the district's 2021 annual operating budget as presented for the mitigation fund. Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve this budget amendment.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second that we amend the 2021 annual operating budget in the amount of $500,000 to be designated towards the mitigation fund to assist those well owners who have been impacted by the drawdown in the Lee County area. Any questions from the board? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, number 8, consideration of and possible action to designate a date by which meeting notices must be posted in advance of board meetings and to establish a date by which written comments must be submitted in advance of board meetings. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This came about from a request by Director Steinbach last month. He expressed, as you may recall, some frustration about receiving documents at the last minute prior to board meetings. District staff met, discussed our calendar and our operational system. We talked with President Talbot as well. And the best solution that we were able to come up with, and I apologize, I had 4 stacks of paper to bring tonight. I got 3 of them. So the 4th one was the calendar. But what we came up with, and I imagine we'll probably need to revisit this before we act on it, but our proposal was to essentially shift back all of our notice dates by 2 days. So currently we post the Friday before board meeting. We would shift that back and post on the Wednesday instead. And along with that would be a requirement that written comments need to be filed by the Friday prior to a board meeting. That way the board could receive those comments on Friday afternoon, and you would have several days to review written comments prior to any board action. This would also necessitate moving back all of our internal dates for, when agendas are finalized, when agendas are drafted and all that. It basically pushes our agenda process back close to the first of the month every month, but it's something that we feel is manageable. One of the other issues that we were going to include with that was that we would also move the date. We would add a date for supporting documents for agenda items would also have to be into the district prior to the day that the agenda would be posted and sent out to the board. So that way we also get you all the documents from, if we have an issue, say something from the city of Bastrop comes in regarding their permit, their supporting documents, the legal response from from the district staff would all be in your packet when it's mailed out, and that way we can move those deadlines back and get you the materials well in advance. Like I say, it was our best attempt at trying to address that issue, and there is some flexibility. I spoke with Director Fleming about it, and he raised the question of last minute submittals and how we would address those, and I realize there are some concerns that could come out of that. Absent having those documents to give you tonight, I wouldn't recommend taking action on it. So I'd like to bring those documents back to you, showing you the calendar, the proposed changes that we're making, and we can take it up at a later board meeting. But I think it gives us a good footing for addressing a lot of the complaints or the issues that we've had in terms of document delivery for the board between staff, outside counsel, district counsel as well, and getting all that to you so you do have it well in advance of board meetings.
I believe, as Jim said, we did meet and talk about it. It is going to require discipline, not only on Jim's part, but discipline on our part. If we, as a board, want something on the agenda, we're going to have to comply with that, the schedule. Also, not call Jim the night before meeting and say, Jim, you got to get this to the board, because based upon the schedule we've got, it would not make it to the board in time. And hearing comments back from the board, I think it's going to be really important once we get used to it, and there's going to probably be a few bumps down the road. But several board members have commented to me they're really wanting as much time as possible to review documents that they're going to be required to take action on, so that when they come in here for the meeting, they have given it adequate time and understand the issue, and better prepared to ask staff or legal counsel or engineers questions. So let's get that out, and the board can provide some comments and such back to Jim, and we'll have it on the August agenda for approval.
And honestly, I think that for staff and for the board, I think we can make these adjustments pretty quickly and pretty easily. I have a suspicion that the lawyers on all sides, maybe the ones that take the greatest issue with it, filing at the last minute seems to be a tradition in the legal profession. And so, Shannon, y'all know this too. So it may be a hard habit to break, but I think once we work through it, I think everybody will kind of appreciate that we're getting better engagement across the board.
Well, and usually the legal issues are the most important issues, so those
Right.
are the ones we need to be reading and studying so that
That's true.
we are prepared.
Director Steinbach, yes, sir.
I brought this up, but I'll say like today, I didn't get back to my headquarters till 4:30 this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
And had to be here at 5:30. That's 1 hour. You just don't, if something comes in on the computer, I don't have a secretary there to inform me what comes in or something like that. So it's just not good business.
Well, now that I don't have a secretary anymore, Carl, I'm in the same boat, and sometimes when I got just enough time to get my stuff together and.
How much would y'all pay? You got them all. How many you got?
Plus, I will say, usually I have my board packet reviewed and my notes ready, and so it's just, Carl says it the best, it's just not good business. And I think once you see what Jim is going to present, again, we'll probably do a little tweaking once we implement it, but I think it'll make the board meetings run smoother and the board feeling more comfortable regarding the decisions they have to make.
Mr. President, make a motion to table this item until we receive further information from the general manager.
Okay, do I hear a second? I have a motion second that we table item number 8 until we receive additional information from the general manager. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item number 9 is consideration of and possible action on the request of Gatehouse Water LLC for a no increase amendment to special condition number 8 of operating permits for district wells numbers 5933122, 5933123, 5933217, 5933409, 5933410, 5933411, 5933412, 5933413, 5933504, and 5933505 from the Central Aquifer located in Lee County. Gatehouse permits, Gatehouse amended request, Gatehouse Water LLC submission to demonstrate compliance with special condition number 8 of Gatehouse permit, and Gatehouse Water LLC request to modify the 2016 monitoring well agreement applicable to the Gatehouse permit to address certain district monitoring network issues raised by the board. At this time, the board will adjourn into executive session to consult with our attorney on this matter. And so we will adjourn to that room.
Mike, just given the current circumstances and everything else, rather than packing into the small room, do you think it would be better for us just to use this room and temporarily clear it? Just
Maintain our distance.
Fair enough.
We'll adjourn into executive session at 8:05.
That was the other reason for the suggestion. And
Be sure it's not. Okay, we used to meet in the kitchen, executive session.
Okay, guys. No.
Go ahead, I'll kick you out.
Oh.
If you haven't read that,
Exactly, so.
However,
All right. I will call back to the order at 8:45 PM, the board meeting of the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. The board has had an opportunity to consult with legal counsel regarding item number 9, and I will defer item number 9 to the board attorney so that she can recommend to the board the action process that we need to take here.
Thank you, President Talbot. Normally, we don't have an action process, but item 9 essentially has 3 actions embedded in one item. And so I recommend that the board take up each one separately, and a written order will be issued reflecting the board's decision on each. And so first, we're gonna go a little, I would recommend that you take it up a little out of order with 9.2, which would be looking at the submission to demonstrate compliance with special condition number 8. And then follow that with item 9.1, and then finally 9.3.
Okay?
So if you have any motions to entertain, that's my recommended process.
And then we will start with action item number 9.1, which is for item number 2. Do I hear a motion from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board find that special condition number 8 was not complied with.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second that the board has determined that special condition 8 of the permit has not been complied with. Any questions from the board?
I have one question, President Talbot, members of the board. Due to a potential conflict of taking water from my property, I'm going to recluse myself from item number 9.
Okay, please have the record reflect that board member, Mr. Herbert Cooper, is recusing himself. That being said, I still have a motion and a second determining that Gatehouse has failed to comply with special condition number 8. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next will be item 9.2, which is item number 1, as directed by the board attorney. And this is to amend the request for a no increase amendment to special condition 8 for the wells listed on the agenda.
I move that we deny that amendment request.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that we deny the amendment request requested by Gatehouse Water LLC for no increase amendment to condition number 8, operating permits for the wells listed on the agenda. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion passes 9 to 1.
8 to 1.
Oh, that's right, 8 to 2.
8 to 1. 8 to 1 with one abstention,
8
right?
to 1, I'm sorry. Okay, and then the last item is item number 3. And This will be item 9.3. A request to modify the 2016 monitoring well agreement. I'll entertain a motion.
Mike, I move we deny that motion, that request.
Okay. I have a motion to deny the request to modify the monitoring well agreement. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second that the district deny Gatehouse's request to modify the 2016 monitoring well agreement. Any questions from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion carries 8-1. All right, that completes the action required for item number 9. Item number 10 is the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. General manager's report for the period ending June 30th, 2021. During this period, we had 11 new wells that were drilled, 10 agricultural and domestic wells, and 1 single test well. No pre-existing wells were registered with the district during this time. At this point in time, we had no reports of wells plugged. Did not perform any water quality tests, but we did get out and engage 7 wells. We're getting out and getting at least a couple in the mornings every week. From the no surprise file, drought conditions currently in Lean Bastrop County, neither currently reporting any drought conditions. Manville Water Supply Corporation contacted me after the initial public hearing in June. I had a discussion with their general manager, and they have withdrawn their application. They are currently evaluating whether a smaller project on that site would be economically viable. And on the GM report, I said they may refill later. That should be they may refile in the future. But for the time being, they're trying to evaluate what kind of a project might better fit in that area. So that permit is currently off of our books until they do come back to refile it. Item number 2, the district has been selected for, we drew one of the 6 short straws in the state, and we've been randomly selected by the state auditor's office for the financial and compliance audits. That process is ongoing and should be completed in November. And auditors being auditors, they have asked me to specifically ask this question: have all of you received, or have any of you not received the engagement letter from the auditor?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I haven't seen any now.
Some of you, some of you were given physical copies at the
Oh,
LCRA
yeah.
hearing.
Yeah, that's right.
And some of you should have received them via email.
That's right.
You
So-
did get it.
Okay. So I will ask that one more time for the auditors in the record. Have any of you not received the auditor's engagement letter? Hearing none, we will say you received it. Thank you. So that, like I said, that process will be completed in November. We're in the process of finalizing all the submissions for them. The auditor has asked that they have, I think, 4 of your email addresses. They have asked for those of you that haven't released your email address to them to reconsider, so that way they can get you the draft copy of the audit in advance of it being released. But we've, like I said, we've got a couple of months to get that sorted out.
You did get Mark Black.
So item number 3, this is something that a few other districts do, and it's something we haven't really looked at, but it might be worth considering. I had a conversation with a landowner up in North Lee County who had a well that was producing essentially very low quality water. Nothing that he could use for his property. He's going to have a new well drilled, but he asked if the district had a fund to help offset the cost of plugging the previous well. And at this point in time, we don't have a plugging program, but I know other districts do offer a cost sharing program or something along those lines to help well owners actually offset the cost of having to plug a deleterious well. What I would recommend, or what I'm asking at this point in time, is that we consider basically 2 things. 1, writing that into the budget, or evaluating writing it into the budget for next year, so that we can have a definitive line item for well plugging. I don't suspect we need to put a lot of money into it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of cost. Yes, ma'am.
About what does it cost to plug a well?
The landowner that I was talking to said he was expecting $3,000 to $5,000 to plug it.
I would recommend that you refer this item to the monitoring committee?
Budget or monitoring?
Monitoring, probably both.
Okay.
Let the monitoring evaluate the parameters and then forward it over to the budget committee for their consideration.
Yeah. Like I say, this is a program that we probably should be offering, and I don't expect we don't have a whole lot of wells to get plugged in this district, but if it does come up, it's nice for us to be able to underwrite some of that cost.
Jim, is there something particular about this well that would cause you to bring it up, or is it just so happened that this was a good opportunity to bring it to the board?
I've worked with this gentleman for a while. We tried to figure out what was going on with it, and he just never could get good water out of it. So the other day, I actually saw his application come in for a new well, and I called him up to see what was going on. And in the course of that conversation, he brought up plugging and whether we had a plugging program.
So you're seeing this just as an opportunity for us to consider establishing a fund? Okay.
Yeah, it popped up. He asked the question, and I thought, well, this is something worth evaluating. So
That's why I feel like it's a program. The monitoring committee is more oriented to setting up the parameters of the program and then forward it to budget for budget analysis.
we'll take a look at it that way then. The next item I had, GMA 12 met June 12th. Gary Westbrook referenced that. The crux of the conversation was how to adjust the process for GMA 12 going forward in the next in the next planning cycle. Gary, I think, is the only GM that's been there since the first planning cycle, so he brought some good history to how the first sets of DFCs were developed. And I think the agreement that we walked away with was that we need to incorporate some of those ideas that were originally used in the first DFC cycle. And so as we go forward carrying on these conversations, we're going to continue doing basically parallel tracks of finishing this DFC cycle and pre-planning the next cycle so that we can hit the ground running and really incorporate some of the new ideas that have been brought to us this year and try and bring back some of the original ideas that were used in the first DFC cycles to rebalance how we're coming up with these DFCs.
Jim, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel about reconciling the 5 districts in a way that would satisfy the 4 and Post Oak Savannah?
There are possibilities, but by the same token, it's going to be, I think it may be challenging. I mean, to be perfectly honest, Mr. Westbrook's position paper essentially dropped a load of gravel on both sides of the Awa Creek and Brazos River for people to pick up and chuck at those districts. So we're going to have to, because even if we can resolve his issue, anybody else that has issues in the other districts are going to get hammered by his same statement. So I'm not going to say it's without hope, but it's maybe a little bit of an uphill battle. But I think there are still options that can be pursued by both districts to find something.
Do you think the districts are taking seriously Vista Ridge's, I wouldn't call it a threat, but assertion that they're going to sue everybody on the planet if they don't get their water included in the budget, in the DFC?
I think there are ways that this issue can be addressed for Post Oak Savannah that leave Post Oak Savannah the only one that has to worry about that. So that would be my response to that. I don't think that a solution necessarily requires every other district jumping into that pot with them. And this goes to Linda Curtis's comment earlier. Based on availability of venues and availability of board members during the month of August, the recommendation for the DFC hearing is that we either do it in conjunction with our regular board meeting or in lieu of our August board meeting. That way we can focus entirely on that single issue. At this point, we don't have a whole lot that I think will necessarily have to come back in August. If we do, we could always have a special call meeting after our regular, the following week to take up district business. But I know that everyone on the board is available for the August meeting. We have a venue that we can use, so my recommendation would be that we plan on conducting the DFC hearing then.
What is the pleasure of the board? My recommendation is we do it in lieu of the board meeting, so we can totally.
On that date, whatever we do, it would work for me.
Where would it be?
We do it here.
Okay.
I think this has a better capacity than the Aqua Conference Room, and we still haven't found, we're waiting for the banks to reopen their community rooms in Bastrop County, so right now this is our best venue for that.
Well, somehow everybody got here at 5:30, so what would you think about starting a little earlier?
That was gonna be my next recommendation, was that we start at something like 6 o'clock, and that way hopefully we can wrap by about 9 or so.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Spring's eternal. So that being said, we will get the notice out. That gives everybody a month, so you're very welcome, ma'am. So this next item shouldn't really come as any surprise other than the speed at which it happened. We do have a pending permit from the city of Bastrop based on the presentation they gave 3 months ago now. They're seeking 3 additional wells located on the excess ranch property, total of 4,000 acre feet, which would be aggregated with their existing 2,000 acre feet. So it gives them at the end of the day, it would be 4 wells, 6,000 acre feet on that excess ranch property. We have not really even begun to process this one. We know there's going to be some deep dives that have to be done to get this one ready, just in terms of the title on the water and some of the history and the legal transactions on that property. But we will keep you informed as we move forward on that one. The upcoming, well, I posted this but Region K met this morning. It was the first meeting, housekeeping. They approved a new consulting for Region K. It was nothing tremendously exciting. And there was one other meeting that I didn't have posted, but Post Oak Savannah's meeting July 27th at 3 p.m. at their offices. I did not see a virtual component for this, but it's a public hearing regarding request by Alcoa to modify their existing groundwater permits for place of use and to amend their and to add transport permits to that. My understanding, I'm sorry?
I think it's also
Yes, place and type of use, I apologize.
Jim, they posted an update today, they changed it to a virtual meeting for everybody but the staff, applicants, anybody who's interested.
I looked at 1 o'clock and it was still
Yeah.
online. Okay,
It's
so
all longer.
So that will be virtual for everyone except staff. We'll get the link to that on our website. My understanding right now is that these permits, these are pre-existing permits, the water that was associated with them, the majority of it, if not all of it, is already currently built into the DFC runs. So while changing place and type of use and adding export may change how that water is being produced, at the end of the day, it doesn't change that, the impacts of that production was already built into our DFCs and into Post Oak Savannah's DFCs. So it's worth keeping an eye on, but it's not like it's not 25,000 acre feet of new production that we haven't seen yet. So that's what I've got for upcoming meetings. Yes, ma'am.
Just a little tiny housekeeping thing. If you do decide to do the new deadlines for agenda items, you might, on our future calendars, you might just put them on the dates, like deadline 4 and deadline.
Yes, sir.
And that would remind everybody.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Does the board have any questions regarding Top's general manager's report?
I'd like to say thank you for a nice detailed report. I enjoyed getting a written one and
Yes, sir.
it's very well done. Thank you.
I lost the habit while we were meeting virtually, so I'm trying to retrain myself to sit down and.
Well, it's welcome.
Okay. Item number 11, discussion of Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District legislation, related legislation, or activities occurring that affect or pertain to the district and groundwater. Mr. Ellis.
Good evening, and again, apologize that the video that I was trying to key up decided to play without me telling it to, and I apologize for the interruption. This was a really unique session, one of the probably the most difficult session I've been through in my 30 years of dealing with the legislature, primarily because of the pandemic. The biggest issue that they had to face was the redistricting. The census didn't get those numbers in time, so that never happened. The second biggest issue they had to deal with was the budget. That did get done, and then the governor vetoed Article 10 of the Appropriations Act, which is the entire legislative budget. Your state audit may be cut short since they no longer have funding as of September 1st.
So drag my feet for my hair? Okay.
Yeah, next time they make a request of you, just tell them, show me your funding. unless the Democrats come back from DC in time to get a bill passed, and the comptroller has said in order to be able to cut checks on September 1st, then August 20th is the absolute deadline that they have to have something all the way through the legislature and signed by the governor. So that's a pretty tight deadline, and this is, I have never seen anything like this and all these things that's ever occurred in Texas history. Routinely the federal government will go without a budget for years, and at times they will have the problem of having to raise the debt ceiling, which they found a way around that. It automatically increases as they go along now. And they would have a big fight over a vote on the debt ceiling, and that shut down the federal government for some period of time. And when they came back in, all of those employees got paid the full amount they would have been paid had they been at work. So it really never hurt anybody. I don't know that can or will happen in this situation. If those checks don't go out on September 1st, I can't promise any of those people that they're going to be able to get a check later on. The other checks that got hurt was there was a consideration for adding a 13th check. The Texas Teachers Retirement System pays out monthly, and they were talking about adding a full month's pay to every retired teacher in the state of Texas for the next 2 years. That didn't pass during the regular session. It's on this special session agenda. But again, nothing's happening because we had a third of the House, 57 Democrats, now 56 Democrats that left the state. And we'll have to see what happens there. As a result of the pandemic, as a result of everything else, this was actually a fairly light session in terms of total bills, but there were 6,927 total bills filed. I tracked just under 150 of those as being relevant to groundwater conservation districts and subsidence districts across the state. That compares to 7,420 last session, a difference of about 493. So quite a few, a large number of bills not filed this session. 1,073 got sent to the governor, which is also a low number. Last time was 1,429. So not only did fewer bills get filed, but even fewer bills got passed. Then the governor signed 947 of those, as to compared to 1,229 last time, and then let 105 become law without his signature, as compared to 1,373 last time. There was one line on a veto, which I've already mentioned. He then also vetoed an additional 20 bills, which was 36 fewer than he vetoed last time. I guess whether it's good news or bad news, I'm not sure, but none of the bills that were to amend Chapter 36 of the Water Code ever got passed. There was one bill that made it through the House, through the Senate, through the House, came back to the Senate for concurrence in the House amendments. The Senate refused to concur and requested a conference committee, and the House refused or just didn't appoint conferees, so that bill died without ever going to conference. That was Senate Bill 152 by Senator Perry. It was carried in the House by Chairman King. There are other bills that obviously that might impact your operations. I'm going to mention a few of them real quickly. House Bill 1082 by Phil King and sponsored by Senator Zaffarini relates to the availability of personal information of an elected public officer. Under the current law, you have to opt out of having your information made public. So if you don't file a paper saying, I don't want my information made public, then it is public record as to what your home address is, what your contact information is. This bill turns that completely 180 degrees. You now have to opt in to make your information public if you want to. So if you take no action, then all of your information is now going to be held private. House Bill 1118 by Capriglione, sponsored in the Senate by Senator Paxton, relating to state agency and local government compliance with cybersecurity training requirements. I think I mentioned that to you before. Because you don't spend more than 25% of your time working on the district's computers, you don't have to take that cybersecurity training. At least I believe that's the finding of the staff. So if you ever do cross that 25% threshold, you will have to take the cybersecurity training. I still recommend you go ahead and take it. There's a free course offered by the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts. As the supervisors of this staff, I think it's a good idea that you know what they're required to do so you can make sure it's actually happening as you supervise the staff. So it's a good idea, when they come to you and looking for various appropriations on their cybersecurity issues, I think it'd be helpful for you to know what those requirements are. House Bill 1428 by Dan Huberty in the House and sponsored by Senator Huffman, relating to procurement by a political subdivision of a contingent fee contract for legal services. It put some limitations. Last session, they required that all contingency fee contracts be approved by the Attorney General. Now they put some additional restrictions on that. I don't believe you have any contingency fee contracts, but if you ever wanted to do one, please be aware that you're going to have to follow some new rules. Senate Bill 1225 by Huffman in the Senate, sponsored by Representative Patty in the House, relating to the authority of a governmental body impacted by a catastrophe to temporarily suspend the requirements of the public information law. We had a number of people that especially during the ice storm, that said, you send in a Public Information Act request we can't possibly respond to. We can't even get in the office, we've got no power, there's nothing we can do. Apparently they kind of dragged out those responses or lack of response for some lengthy period of time following that. And so the legislature decided that they needed to put some bookends on that as to what you had to do and how long you could refuse to respond because of a catastrophe. So that's there. Again, unless there's a catastrophe that shuts down your operations, it really doesn't apply. But that was the biggest change to the Public Information Act. There were a lot of bills that didn't pass that I tracked. I'm going to send out a written report on all of those so that you have a look at those and see how far they got, what happened to them. There are several bills that I tracked that never even got a hearing in either house, and I'm obviously not going to go over those. I do want to play for you this recording that came from the hearing on Senate Bill 152 back in March when it was first heard in the Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. Senator Perry is the chair of that committee, and he was the sponsor of the bill, and he had this kind of a speech at the end that I think you need to hear. Let me kind of lay it out. There were 3 provisions in that bill that really were not very controversial at all. All of those, the Texas Water Conservation Association's Groundwater Committee had basically worked out all of the problems in that before we ever got to session. There were a couple of small changes made again once we got to session, but those all got worked out. They really were non-controversial. The first one had to do with what happens to your management plan when your desired future condition has been declared unreasonable. The second one had to do with providing notice to adjacent landowners if you're putting in a well large enough that the spacing limitation from that well would encroach onto your property. And the third one had to do with petitioning a district, giving the ability to petition a district or require a district to adopt rules allowing a petition for someone to come and ask you to change your rules. All of those, the language is worked out, and had that been all that was in the bill, it would have passed probably in April. But the fourth provision was more controversial and ran into kind of a buzzsaw in the House, and that has to do with your ability to recover your attorney's fees. Right now, you are guaranteed, the district may request and the court shall grant your attorney's fees in any case in which you prevail for those issues in which you are the prevailing party. Senator Perry believes that should be a loser pays provision, but this session, instead of trying to make it a loser pays, meaning that you might have to pay the other side's fees, he changed that shall to a may. And a good number of the groundwater conservation districts around the state were still opposed to that. The strong belief that if you're not guaranteed that you're going to get your attorney's fees back, then it makes it very difficult to make the decision on going forward with the litigation. As we pointed out multiple times, it's not your money. You can't hurt a district by taking away its attorney's fees award. You're hurting taxpayers and you're hurting ratepayers. They're the ones that get hurt by that decision. So the testimony in the Senate was basically, we really like these 3 provisions. We've got a real problem with this fourth one. And when it got to the House, the House sponsor basically said that he was opposed to that entirely. And so when he passed the bill, he amended the bill to take that provision completely out. And it was that change that Senator Perry decided he couldn't live with, and so he killed the entire bill because he couldn't get the one section on attorney's fees passed. Partly because of the speech that he gave, and I'd like to play for you that for you now. It's only a 2-minute recording And I think everybody, since everybody heard it when I accidentally played it, I think everybody can hear it. All right, let me take that back off, okay.
For members' benefit, I believe that GCDs have a vital role in protecting a resource that is not infinite. It's finding that balance to keep that. The more we see the need to confiscate, if you will, or commandeer water resources, specifically urban sprawl in other cities growing like they are, and with a finite resource, they will play a vital role in conserving that and working with that balance. I will tell you, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I'm about done saying it, the GCDs need to get on the same page, and they need to be perceived as equity and balance, and a lot of them do that. But with the rulings that I've perceived coming down, with these challenges that are going to be made, if they're not perceived as being level-handed and fair, they're going to lose in those cases, and water policy as we know it will be different. So I will tell you, if the bill doesn't get through this time, I'm done advocating for the GCD perspective, and I'm one of your biggest advocates under this pink dome. And I can tell you where the red feds are ruling, you're probably going to lose it just on sheer constitutional issues alone. So it's not a threat, it's an observation. I may be wrong, my opinion probably don't matter much. But this is it for me on you guys. And if 75% of your members say it's okay, and I find out that you as an association are working against the bill over that, I'm really done. In fact, I'll probably change my position to 100% unequivocal property rights dictate all and all concerns. So that's not, again, not a threat, and I may be down here for 20 years, I may be down here for another year, who knows? But I'm just kind of done, because this bill should not have anybody on it, period. You can't come up here and say, we like it all but, and then when the but is something that doesn't change your world, I mean, we don't have fear of litigation by the statutes that you quote, but yet we don't like that provision. That don't go well. So see what you can do to get your members on board, but if you're representing your members and I hear that you're going around killing the bill, you just pretty much took your chairman that believes in what your mission is and a responsible way to do it. So that's all I got to say, Mr. Vice Chair.
So there you have it. That was not a threat.
No.
Just thought I'd reiterate that. I don't anticipate any groundwater legislation passing this next session, but we'll have to see what happens. And this is a redistricting year, and rural Texas is going to be devastated through redistricting this year, including the Panhandle. When you do this redistricting, of course, anything is possible. But I think it's going to be very difficult for them to continue to have two separate state senators representing the Panhandle of Texas. Right now, it's Senator Seliger and Senator Perry. Senator Perry lives in Lubbock. I think for Seliger to get enough population, he's going to have to take over most, if not all, of Lubbock. And but we'll see what happens. And Seliger may not run. It may be Perry that represents the entire Panhandle. Anything, and we've already heard various people who've declared they're running for Senator Seliger's seat, whatever it turns out to be. I'm really always interested by the people who announce the seat they're running for before redistricting is done, because the redistricting completely change where you live. I mean, you may not live in that district anymore. That's happened more than once. So, having said that, I think that it's going to be a very interesting interim. It's already been a very interesting interim, and we're watching for the one thing I want to say about these special sessions. There's going to be another one called, I think, in August, and they'll be, if they get the stuff done and they get a quorum, then there has to be at least one more that's going to be called this fall sometime after we get the census numbers on redistricting. And so these special sessions, the governor can require the legislature to consider certain items. If you want to pass an item that's not on that list, if it passes both houses without anybody raising a point of order and gets signed by the governor, it becomes law. whether it was ever added to the call or not. If it's not on the call, that puts an automatic point of order on the bill, but somebody has to call that point of order for that to be meaningful. And again, they can also suspend their rules pretty much anytime they want to with the majority vote. At least in the House. In the Senate, I'm sorry, at least in the Senate. The Senate's taken a little bit more than majority vote. The House takes, I think, still 2/3 vote to suspend the rules. So it's going to be a very interesting interim. We haven't even talked about interim charges yet because they're not done meeting. And we don't really have an interim until they get done meeting. But I suspect we're going to see some interim charges. Groundwater will continue to be a topic of conversation. There was nothing filed this session that would have changed the junior rights provision that applies to surface water. So the focus is going to continue to be on groundwater as the primary source of water for the big cities, and this is the kind of area that people are they're going to be focusing on. We've seen it in Post Oak Savannah, we've seen it here, we've seen it in Gonzales, we've seen it in Evergreen. That will continue to be the case. With that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Ellis? Greg, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move back up to item number 9. An oversight on my part. Gary Brown did sign up to address the board regarding this item. I apologize, I didn't get it, so I'm going to ask that he come up and address the board on item number 9.
Well, I suggest that every one of y'all take that little video he just showed you home and listen to it. Because you need to pay attention. What y'all did tonight was took my water rights away from me. I've got several thousand acres down there with my family. We've been in this for 20 years. I've got $12 million worth of infrastructure right there. Now we can't do anything with it. Because of y'all. You've taken it. I don't know what makes you think you have the ability to do that. You're wrong. My family's been here since 1878. And it is disgusting to watch y'all sit up here so thoughtlessly. There hadn't been one positive thing said for a landowner here. Nobody's done anything to help the landowner. All y'all talked about is ways to avoid having to do something. And boy, that's what you did tonight. So I had this little speech, but I got a better place to put it. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to say my little speech because you've already voted. It obviously doesn't do any good. I don't know what you think you did to my rights tonight, but I signed up to speak before you took this cockamamie vote. I didn't get a chance to do it. You need to reconsider and put it on the agenda and do it next meeting, or I'll do what I can do. I don't know what it is I can do sitting up against y'all, but it's disgusting. It makes me sick. Good night.
Okay. I apologize, I did not get this up here, so I was not aware that he had requested.
But Mike, you called for public comment several times.
I know. Item number 12, consideration of a board workshop, conferences, or meetings. I will be getting in touch with the board tomorrow along with Mr. Ellis. We've got to set a date for coming back together for the LCRA meeting. We made a commitment that we would not delay our decision, but we wanted some time to evaluate the information that was presented at the meeting and the previous information that had been provided to us. So when Peggy calls you, just keep that in mind, that we need to move along. And I'm not aware of any educational opportunities. Jim, are you aware of any conferences or anything?
Not at this point, no, sir.
Okay. Any other meetings or anything?
Nothing's coming up between now and the next board meeting.
Good.
Oh, no, I forgot the Groundwater Summit.
Yeah, the Texas Alliance Groundwater District's annual Groundwater Summit is going to start the very end of August and run into the first part of September. It's going to be at the Hyatt Hill Country Resort outside San Antonio. I think all that room block is already gone, so there's not a place to stay over there. But if you're, and they're not doing it remotely at all this year. It's going to be all in person. I believe it's all in person.
I believe so.
It is, yeah.
So, if you're interested in going, please get booked for that, and I hope you find a place to stay.
Okay. The calendar is attached. The only upcoming items is what Jim brought up in his general manager's report, and the agreement by the board that our August meeting will be designated strictly for the public hearing on DSCs. I'm not aware of any other additional items for executive session. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.